Good day, everyone. Welcome to Deku Universe. Today we are beginning part 1 of What If Deku became Dark King and built a villain harem. The fanfiction is created by Jojoflow on fanfiction.net. Now let's begin. No, I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. Those words resounded in the head of young Izuku Midoriya. That what it always came down to wasn't it. You can't do anything without power. Power was everything in this world. There were those who had it like Kakin and All Might, and there were those who didn't like himself. Before Izuku knew it, he was running full tilt down the stairs of the building he'd landed on after grabbing hold of All Might. His hero of a lifetime shut the door on his dream so easily. Izuku had felt powerless his whole life, but never before had he felt so weak. He burst through the stairwell door to the lobby and continued to run, his legs burning, lungs heaving, until he was home, standing before the door to the apartment he shared with his mother. Izuku panted, his shirt soaked with sweat, as he stumbled into the apartment on shaky legs as quietly as possible. Izuku kicked his shoes in the entryway and headed to his room, sliding past his mother unnoticed, and shut the door to his room. Why am I so weak? He grieved, leaning back against the door, sliding slowly to the floor. He was surrounded by All Might memorabilia, his idol. He couldn't stand it looking at that proud smile, knowing it was really there as self-gratification. You revel in your power, don't you? All Might, after all, you're the symbol of peace. Izuku growled, lunging forward to his desk and grabbing the nearest All Might figurine and hurled it against the wall, watching its pieces break apart. All Might lay broken before his feet. If only I could do that to the real All Might, he said as an idea formed in his mind. Power was the status quo of this world, and there were many ways to attain power. After all, didn't people say knowledge was power? Izuku sat in his computer chair, bringing up workout regimens. I'll be powerful not just in body, but mind as well. I'll show. Kakin dashed. Izuku shook his head. It was time he let go of that so-called friendship. Katsuki was. And it was only Izuku's weakness that let him believe the two were still friends. I'll show. Katsuki and All Might. That power is subjective. And so, when Izuku pushed himself to the limit, both body and mind, training himself rigorously over the summer, weight lifting, running, alongside numerous hours of study, everything from tactics and martial arts to biology and chemistry, taking a designated interest in the way the human body can be forcibly developed, such as unlocking the brain's limiters on the muscles. Izuku shed his small frame, bulking it considerably with muscle coupling that with his growth spurt, shooting him up from his 5'2" to 5 feet 11 inches. Izuku was hardly recognizable, especially with his unruly green hair cut into crew cut. It was during his research that Izuku came across stories of the drag called Trigger, a drag that boosted a user's quirk to its utmost capabilities. This is exactly what I need, Izuku said, looking at his laptop as he did push-ups. Getting into a sitting position, Izuku brought up all the recent events and brought them up on a map. From there, he had a pretty solid search area. After all, like any drag trigger had to have a dealer. Izuku stood up, closing his laptop and grabbing his jacket. Exited his room dressed in black cargo pants, boots, a gray t-shirt stretched taut across his chest, and bumped into his mother, causing her to almost fall before Izuku grabbed hold of her, pulling her to her feet with one hand. Inko Midoriya was a stout woman, so seeing her son pull her back onto her feet before she hit the ground with one hand startled her at the strength he now possessed. Oh, Izuku, are you heading out? Inko asked bashfully. She'd hardly seen her little boy since school ended. He spent all his time in his room, either working out or reading thick volumes on obscure subjects. She'd asked him where he'd gotten the money to hoard all his weights, and his answer had floored her. I sold all that All Might junk. Izuku had idolized All Might to find out he'd sold it all and called it junk. Inko was at a loss for words. It was only one big change after another. First the sale of his All Might collectibles, then the haircut and workout regimen. It was like she was living with a stranger, and it hurt her to think of her only child like that. "Yeah, I'll be back later. Don't wait for me," he said, sliding past her and heading to the front door to put on his shoes. "Izuku, you know I love you, right?" she asked, looking over her shoulder at her son. Izuku stopped his movements for a moment before standing up with his shoes on. "No, Mom," he said as he walked out the front door, closing it behind him without ever looking back. Izuku made his way deep into the city where the last trigger incident had occurred as he went through the multiple photos the media had taken trying to single out the dealer. It was a long shot, but Izuku had done some studying on human behavior, and though he was no expert, he believed himself competent enough to find something out of the ordinary. Izuku stood outside the construction cordon, looking at the destruction before him. Apparently, this trigger incident had resulted in a sound quirk going haywire, casting massive shockwaves across the area and brought down several buildings. Izuku compared the photo, the actual scene, and spotted something in a video. There was a man in a suit carrying a briefcase, which in this day and age is as normal as one can get, but the way the man handled himself while everyone was running and screaming, this man never moved. He just stood still and watched. Izuku smiled. "Found you," he said, going through his pictures once again now that he knew who to look for. Mayuri was walking along the sidewalk, feeling rather pleased with himself. He'd managed to nearly sell out of his trigger. Of course, his orders were just to give the stew out, but why give when you can sell? Besides, either way, the drag still got out there, but he had to be careful. If the boss got wind of him selling this stew, he'd be turned inside out, which is why he was going to call an early night tonight. Mayuri was walking past an alleyway when two hands shot from the darkness and grabbed him by his collar and slammed him up against the back wall of the alley. The force was enough to drive the air from his lungs. He gasped, looking up at the large, shadowy figure approaching him. Mayuri reacted, gathering saliva in his mouth and spit. Mayuri's quirk was acid spit, self-explanatory really. His saliva was corrosive. The figure moved like water, avoiding the shot before kicking him in his mouth. Mayuri felt his teeth shatter as BLD flooded his mouth. He inhaled, feeling bits of tooth fall down his throat as he attempted to scream, only for an iron grip to close around his throat and hoist him against the wall. "Listen closely, because I'm only going to say this once. I own you now, and you're going to give me what trigger you have now, and a quarter of every order you get. Drop it in this alley, and if you don't, I'll find you again, and next time you'll have more than a few broken teeth to worry about. Now shake your head yes if you agree." Mayuri glared down at this guy. He couldn't get a good look at him, mostly because his vision was swimming from the kick to his jaw, and the darkened alley wasn't doing him any favors. He would spit at this guy, but his quirk only worked when he had pure saliva in his mouth. With all the BLD in his mouth, his acid wouldn't be more than a slight itch, and this guy was obviously strong enough to fold him up and stick him in his pocket if he felt like it. Mayuri shook his head and was immediately dropped to the ground. The guy grabbed his suitcase to open it before stopping and tossing it to Mayuri. Mayuri pursed his lips in disappointment. If he had tried to pry open the case, it would have shocked the hell out of him, but apparently the brute had scoped him out pretty well. Mayuri placed his finger into the key lock, allowing it to scan his fingerprint, and popped open. There were 5 vials left, and he handed them over promptly. The guy stowed the vials in one of the pockets of his cargo pants and walked away. Mayuri gripped his mangled mouth in pain as he spit out more bits of broken teeth. "Whoever that guy is, I hope I never see him again." Strength quirks. Izuku walked back into his home at 3 in the morning and noticed the light was on in the living room. After kicking his shoes OU, he rounded the corner, looking at his sleeping mother on the couch, the remote on the floor as an infomercial played. He sighed, turning OU the TV and picking up his mother bridal style before turning OU the light. Izuku placed Inko onto her bed, covering her with the comforter. He sighed, knowing what he was about to do would hurt her gravely, but he had to. If he stayed here, he'd never be able to do what needed to be done. Izuku went to his room and began packing, taking what cash remained from the sale of his All Might CRP and several pairs of clothes. Izuku looked around the room one last time before heading out for the final time. Now that he had Trigger, he could begin in earnest. He would show this world what power really meant. He would stand at the top of not just heroes, but villains as well. He would be the absolute power. Izuku looked at the home he'd carved out from himself after leaving his mother 2 months ago. He'd found this abandoned factory towards the edge of town. It had been under the control of a small drag ring using it as their place of production. A simple call to the cops, and the gang was either arrested or scattered, leaving a nice place for him to set up shop. It had been the perfect setup with all the lab equipment the cops had taken. Izuku had gotten to work immediately on breaking apart the Trigger and re-engineering it for his own purposes as a super steroid for himself. Thankfully, Mayuri had fallen in line immediately, giving him a constant supply of Trigger to work with. And before he knew it, 2 months had passed. Izuku sat at a workbench dressed in a pair of jeans and boots with no shirt, looking at what he'd come up with. There were bags under his eyes, a testament to the work he'd done to get this far. This seems to be what I'm looking for. Izuku was no genius when it came to chemicals, but with what he'd learned in the time since his meeting with All Might, he'd been able to come this far. Izuku smirked as he swirled the vial of neon green liquid. All that's left is to find a DLVRY system, he said, setting the vial down and dropped to the floor to do a series of push-ups. Exercise usually helped him think. He found peace in the repetitive motions of exercise, whether it be push-ups, crunches, or chin-ups. I could inject it, but that's too troublesome, and it's not like my enemies are going to give me a chance to shoot up. Plus, having to carry a series of needles around is too risky. Pills bring up the same issues. Izuku rolled over onto his back, looking up at the cobweb-ridden ceiling, his eyes roving across it, not really looking at anything before he locked onto the window. Smoke was wafting by it, and that smoke gave him an idea. Sitting up, Izuku began to speak. What if I made something like nicotine patches? He said, nodding his head, and jumped to his feet. All right, let's get to work, because after this it's time for a test drive. Inko Midoriya sat in her son's room like she did every day. 2 months. 2 months had passed since her son had left her. Inko's eyes were bloodshot. Dark bags hung under her eyes as she stared down at a picture of a newborn Izuku. Izuku was her little miracle, an inside joke between she and her husband Hisashi. They had tried for so long to have a baby, but nothing seemed to work, and then just as they were contemplating giving up, she'd missed her PRD. Reading her positive PRG and NCY test had been the greatest day of her life, right after the day she'd married Hisashi. Izuku was so tiny when she first held him, and it was hard to compare that baby with the man she'd known prior to him leaving. Inko was so drawn into her memoirs of her baby boy that she didn't notice Mitsuki Bakuga walk into the doorway of Izuku's room. Mitsuki looked at her best friend, or the shell that had taken her place since her son disappeared. Mitsuki and Inko had been friends ever since Mitsuki moved in with her husband. Both women being PRG and NT with their first child brought them closer, along with the fact that Inko's calm demeanor was the perfect match to Mitsuki's explosive personality. Inko, you need to eat something, doll, Mitsuki said, breaking Inko from her thoughts as she locked eyes with the blonde. The hurt on Inko's face was like a gut punch to Mitsuki, no matter how many times she saw it, and in the past 2 months that had been every day. It had all started with Inko coming over to her home, asking if her son was with Katsuki, knowing the two boys were friends before her son grew into the arrogant of today. When Mitsuki told her that Izuku was not there, Inko fell into tears on her doorstep. Mitsuki brought her in to listen to Inko's story of how over the summer Izuku had undergone a frightening transformation before ultimately disappearing one night 2 months ago. Inko had already called the police, telling them of her son's disappearance, but they hadn't turned up anything yet, and every day that went by, Inko slipped further and further into depression, so much so that Mitsuki had to call Hisashi and tell him what had happened. He was supposed to be arriving any day, now work. Keeping him from coming to his wife's aid immediately or some CRP like that. Honestly, Mitsuki couldn't understand what was so dim and important that would keep a man from consoling his wife about their missing child. Mitsuki shook her head as she walked over to Inko, helping her feet, taking notice of how her pink sweater and pants hung loosely across her shrinking frame. "Come on, Inko, let's get you something to eat," Mitsuki said, forcing a smile to her face as Inko shuffled beside her into the kitchen and sat at the table as Mitsuki fixed her something simple, knowing it would be a fight to get Inko to take a bite of anything. Having assembled a sandwich, Mitsuki returned to the table with it and a glass of water, setting them both down in front of Inko. There was no reaction from Inko as she continued to stare at the baby picture of Izuku. Sitting down with a sigh, Mitsuki prepared herself for the battle in front of her. "Inko, darling, you're my best friend, and I only want what's best for you, right? All right, I'm just going to. Come out and say it. You need help, Inko. This isn't healthy. You barely eat, and by the bags under your eyes, I can tell you aren't sleeping. You can't punish yourself for this. It's not your fault." "Yes, it is," Inko shouted, slamming her palms on the table as she stood up, staring down at Mitsuki. "This is my fault. I gave up on him, Mitsuki," Inko said, slumping back in her chair. "He asked me, and I didn't know what to say, so I just said I'm sorry, like that would help him through it. I didn't have the heart to say no, but I didn't have the courage to say yes either, and that's why he left. He quit on me like I quit on him." Tears streamed down Inko's face as she looked down at the picture of her son. Mitsuki was confused as to what Inko was telling her. From her standpoint, there was no mother more supportive than Inko, herself included. "What did he ask you, Inko?" Mitsuki questioned, wondering what question could have brought on the kind of guilt Inko was feeling right now. The question every kid asked Mitsuki: could he be a hero? Katsuki Bakugu was walking down the street, not really heading anywhere, but it's not like he was looking for that dim-in nerd either. No, Katsuki was not looking desperately for Izuku Midoriya. That will be stupid. That loser, what does he think he's doing, making his mom cry like that? Duh. Next time I see Deku, I'm going to crack his face in half. Katsuki kicked a pebble the sidewalk as he walked, his head swirling with thoughts of Deku and the last thing he'd said to him before he disappeared. "Here's how you can get a quirk, Deku. Pray to have one in your next life and jump. The school. SHD, what if he did?" Cold dread spread through Katsuki as he thought of Izuku's body hitting the pavement. No, Deku would never do something stupid like that. He growled as he began to run towards the school. Why was I such a Deku? That thought ran on repeat in Katsuki's head as he chased the same answer in a vicious loop. Because even without a quirk, Izuku was better than me, and with one he'd be out of my league. Katsuki jumped the fence of his school, the building closed for summer break. No one would even know if Izuku was lying dead around here. But no matter how long or hard Katsuki searched, there was no sign of Izuku's body. So why didn't he feel relieved? In fact, he felt worse now, knowing that his friend was out there somewhere. What am I saying? I was no friend to Izuku. I was just his bully, a jealous that picked on him, making his life a living hell. I am sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. Katsuki shouted that over and over again as the sun set on his anguish. Izuku walked into a clothing store specializing in making clothes for those with heteromorphic quirks. He was dressed in a blue t-shirt, jeans, his boots, and a baseball cap pulled low over his head. Walked to the back of the store near the changing rooms where two security guards waited. They both stepped aside as Izuku approached, giving 3 knocks, quickly followed by 2 pause, and then 3 more on one of the stalls. The stall opened to reveal a staircase leading down, which Izuku walked down, leading to another door, which was open from the inside, revealing a large weiss. The room was furnished nicely with a large oak desk at the back with 2 couches facing opposite each other on the left and right. Izuku looked at the man sitting at the desk. He wore a black suit with a golden tie, but his most striking feature was the fact he was a Humanoid cat. His fur was striped with light and dark shades of orange, vertical pupils nestled in. Green irises much like Izuku's. This was the owner of the store above, but he was also the underworld broker known as Fat Cat. The name was fitting given his quirk and the fact that this kitty was missing no meals. It's good to see you. Izuku had been going by the name M, using his initials as an alias given the circles he ran in now. Izuku had met Fat Cat a week or so after leaving his mother's. Fat Cat had a thief in his midst that had made OU with a not-so small portion of his funds. Needless to say, he couldn't let this stand, so he put a hit out on his former employee. Only no one could seem to find the guy. That all changed when Izuku had brought him in. They'd had a working relationship ever since. I need to fight Fat Cat, Izuku responded, getting right down to his purpose here. There was no reason to engage in pleasantries. They were business associates. And while Izuku hadn't perfected the American accent, he'd been working on a further layer to his disguise. If he seemed like he didn't speak Japanese, people were more likely to let things slip, and they'd no doubt mistake him for an American and not a native of Japan if someone were to describe him. Well, it's about time. Here, I thought you'd never say yes to a fight. Fat Cat had been trying to get him to fight in his events since they first met. That was after him had turned down the opportunity to work for him. The man was an enigma. All he'd wanted was the bounty for the thief, nothing more. In fact, this was only his second time ever talking to him face to face. Everything else had been done through phone calls. You're in luck, actually, Em. I have an event set up at the docks tonight. Head to the docks, say 10 o'clock. I'll send you the warehouse number at 9. Wouldn't want this getting out. Not that I suspect you of being a snitch, but one can never be too careful, can he? Izuku gave a nod before turning on his heel and walking back out. He needed to get ready for tonight. This would be his first test run of his steroid. Izuku looked at his watch. It read 9:45. The text had arrived. Just as Fat Cat said, it would letting him know it was Warehouse 18, the very warehouse he stood outside of now. But there was no noise aside from the lapping waves. He arched an eyebrow as he stepped up to the warehouse door, having it open for him, releasing the noise of a large crowd inside. Obviously, the building was soundproofed very well. Izuku hoisted his gym bag higher on his shoulder as he walked in to see the crowd of people cheering around a raised concrete arena where two women were fighting. On one end of the arena stood an African-American woman with thick black dreadlocks down to the small of her back. She was wearing a striped black and blue tank top with matching shorts and gray sneakers. As she stood there, her dreadlocks lifted up, forming two large fists which she launched at her opponent. Izuku thought her opponent was wearing some kind of opaque cloak, only to have the cloak flare out into two pairs of wings, launching her into the air and away from the GRPNG hands. The girl wore a yellow bomber jacket topping black and yellow striped leggings. Wings zipped through the air narrowly, avoiding the grasping hands of her opponent before soaring straight into the ceiling. Her opponent chasing after all the way until wings kicked OU the ceiling and dove straight down, planting both her feet into Dread's face, driving her to the pavement with the resounding sound of breaking bone. Izuku turned away from the spectacle, spotting Fat Cat making his way over to him. I'm glad you could make it. Come with me, I'll show you to the changing room and explain the rules on the way. Izuku wordlessly followed after him, listening to the broker speak. Well, rules are simple. Quirks are allowed as much as you like, but no weapons like knives or guns, unless you know that's your quirk. Also, no support gear. We're here for quirks, not tech. That's another show, he said, smiling as they arrived at the changing room. Got you your own room, too, since you're new and all, he said, turning around to look at him. Gotta check the bag, he said, holding out his paw. Izuku held out to Fat Cat as he opened it and looked at Izuku's gear. Yeah, this works. Now, get ready with the way thing are going. Your fight will be up soon. I'm betting on ya. And don't worry, you'll get that smoking habit, he said, winking and clicking his tongue as he walked out, shutting the door behind him. I bet you are, Izuku said as he tossed his bag on the bench and shrugged out of his hood, revealing a black muscle shirt alongside his usual cargo pants and boots. Izuku reached into his bag, pulling out a mask similar to those worn by wrestlers. It was a complete face mask lacking a hole for the mouth, predominantly black, except the face of the mask being white, and over the eyes were green one-sided lenses. The next and final piece of his gear were a pair of fingerless gloves sporting steel and force knuckles. After slipping them on, he smashed his fists together. The sound of clashing metal filled the room. Now, for the most important part, he said, pulling out a nicotine box, but the patches inside were of Izuku's own design. He pulled one out and, lifting his shirt, placed it right over his heart, slapping it into place to break the seal on it. For a moment, nothing happened, and Izuku worried. He might have made a mistake, but then he felt searing pain enter his chest as the drag went to work, flowing through his body like acid. Izuku crouched over the wooden bench, gripping the sides as he felt his muscles grow under his skin, almost to the point of tearing through it, but it stopped as soon as it had started. Izuku released his hold on the bench, seeing he'd tore out chunks of it with his fingers. He turned to mirror, catching sight of himself. He looked different from the man who'd walked in here moments ago. He was at least several inches taller, placing him at over 6 feet. His muscles bulged with any movement, pressing his veins against his, which seemed to slightly glow green. It worked. I did it, he shouted as there was knocking at the door. You're up, man, was shouted through the door. Izuku walked out, crushing the doorknob in his grip before walking out to the roar of the crowd. Death Arms stood up from his desk at his agency, putting out his cigarette as he walked to the door, having completed his hero worksheet, and was heading home. He stretched, reaching for the doorknob before it was thrown open by one of his sidekicks. Death Arms, sir, we have fresh intel in, shouted his sidekick, a young man in black and yellow armbands like himself, wearing a blue shirt and jeans. Death Arms groaned at this development. Guess heroes don't need sleep, he thought to himself. If it's not something big, let someone else handle it. He set about to walk out before his sidekick informed him of the nature of the intel. Sir, it's Fat Cat. Death Arms turned, grabbing the paper. As he looked it over, Fat Cat was Death Arms' white whale, as some would say. He'd been trying to get that for years, but he was as sly as he was portly. But this looked like his best chance. Get everyone to the docks. I'm finally going to skin that cat tonight, Death Arms shouted as his sidekick ran OU to round up everyone. You've gotten you last slice of lasagna, Garfield, Death Arms said, staring out his window towards the docks. Izuku stepped into the ring, facing his opponent, a man with a bull quirk, it seemed, giving him large forward-facing horns and hooves instead of feet. He even wore a large nose ring to fit his motif. The announcer walked alongside of the ring to start the fight. Crooks and criminals, I bring to you another glorious fight. On the left we have returning fighter Black Bull. The crowd went wild. Obviously, he was the favorite to win. And on the right we have mysterious newcomer M. The crowd mostly booed, but Izuku didn't care. This was just his testing ground. Once he got what he needed, he'd never set foot here again. All right, let the fight begin. Bull wasted no time rushing his opponent, looking to gore him with his large horns. Izuku took his stance, his right foot behind him and his left forward, bracing for the impact. I'm going to mow you down, boy, Bull shouted moment before he impacted with Izuku. Izuku grabbed hold of Bull's horns as they made contact. He was surprised at how little force he felt before lifting Bull OU his feet and then bringing him down in a full frontal body slam. He felt light as air. This is it. This is the feeling of my power. The power I crafted with my own 2 hands. Izuku looked down at the prone form of Bull as he tried to rise. Izuku brought his foot up and brought it down on the back of Bull's head, smashing his head deep into the pavement. I'm not done, I want more, Izuku thought as he reached down, grabbing Bull by his horns, only to smash his knee into his face again and again, feeling Bull's face given under the crushing blows until his horns snapped from the force, letting Black Bull roll across and out of the arena. The crowd was silent at the brutal showing they'd been faced with as the front of the warehouse was blown in. Pro heroes, nobody move. The warehouse erupted into movement, people scrambling to escape or fight. Oh, you the heroes. Izuku homed in on Fat Cat, making a break for it, and decided running away would be for the best. He wasn't sure how long his drag would last, and he wasn't ready for the pros to find out about him yet. He took OU, quickly catching up to Fat Cat, his enhanced muscles propelling him with ease. Fat Cat was in the locker room, trying to scurry through a window that was obviously too small for him. Fat Cat fell from the window, looking at Izuku. Help me get out of here, please. Death Arms has it in for me. If you get me out, I'll get you whatever you want. Money, girls, drags, whatever. I'll get it. Izuku didn't really want to help Fat Cat, but he couldn't pass up the chance to hang a debt around his neck. Stand back, Izuku said as he grabbed his bag before cocking his fist back and smashing a large hole in the wall that both ran through. Death Arms had spotted Fat Cat immediately, and the broker had done the same and made a run for it, followed by some masked villain. Take care of these guys, I'm going after Fat Cat, he shouted, barreling through the low-level thugs as he chased Fat Cat. Hearing a large crash in the backroom, Death Arms kicked in the door, seeing a large hole there, most likely the work of the masked man who'd been following Fat Cat. Death Arms jumped through the hole into the cold night, seeing two figures running towards a maze of shipping containers. If they get in there, I'll never find them, the pro shouted, grabbing one of the lockers from the changing room and hurling it as he ran, watching it crash in front of the escaping duo. Fat Cat yowled in panic as a locker nearly crushed him. That nearly killed me, he shouted, turning around and having Izuku's bag thrown in his face. I'll hold him. Here, take that and get out of here, he said calmly, turning back to face Death Arms. Fat Cat didn't need to be told twice. He bounded away on all fours with the bag on his back just as Death Arms arrived. I feel sorry for villains like you. You have such loyalty to garbage, Death Arms said, cracking his knuckles. This is your only chance, Dash. Death Arms narrowly avoided a fist, too, his face feeling his cheeks split open as he dodged to the side, driving a fist into the villain's side, feeling as if he'd just punched steel. Izuku didn't have time to listen to this hero. He was on a time limit that could run out at any second, so he pressed the attack using what he knew of Death Arms to his advantage. Izuku stepped in close, not giving Death Arms any breathing room. He knew that a few years ago Death Arms had broken his left leg, catching some fallen debris. Capitalizing on that, Izuku threw a gut punch, watching as the pro dodged to the left. The moment he landed, Izuku kicked his knee inward, feeling it snap under the blow. Death Arms yelled in pain as he threw a Hail Mary right hook, catching Izuku on the right side of the head, smashing in the lens of his mask. Izuku stepped back, feeling the plastic cut at his eyelid and brow. He pulled the lens from his mask, revealing his bloody green eye that to Death Arms seemed to glow in the darkness. The pro fell to his side, looking at his broken limb. He reached for the radio on his belt, only to have Izuku stomp onto his hand, shattering the bones there. The pro went to yell again in pain, only to have Izuku's fist crash into his face, driving the back of his head into the concrete. I feel sorry for you heroes who talk about justice but don't know what true justice is. The only justice in this world is that of the strong. Only the powerful are just, and you Death Arms are neither. I am the bane of your hero society. You made me, poisoning me with your hypocritical venom, but it didn't kill me like all you wanted it to. No, I used that venom you all spit at me. It's coursing through my veins and makes me more powerful than any of you can imagine. Izuku kicked the pro in his side, rolling him onto his stomach before grabbing his arms from behind as he stepped on his back, pulling with all his strength until he felt both arms dislocate. By this time, Death Arms was succumbing to the pain of his injuries, his world swimming in and out of focus. He was aware that his arms had been dislocated, but he'd hardly felt it before passing out. Izuku walked away from the declaration of war he'd made out of death arms as green steam wafted from his body, causing him to shrink as his muscles returned to normal. He disappeared as Death Arm's sidekicks showed up. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Fat Cat had been hiding in the shadows watching the fight, recording it actually mostly for leverage on him, but now he knew what to do with it. He'd upload Death Arm's defeat. Fat Cat knew when an opportunity was at hand, and this was it. He slinked OU back to his hideout to upload what he'd seen and then make good on his word to him. No, not I'm Bane. Death Arm's sidekicks came upon the aftermath of the battle and were shocked at what they saw. Death Arms had been pinned to a shipping container. The metal of the container tore out and punctured through the hero's once proud arms twice over, from which he hung limply like he'd been crucified. His arms were a collage of bruises, as if someone had smashed them repeatedly. His face was an unrecognizable mess, both eyes swollen shut as BLD ran from his mouth. His left leg had bone protruding from the skin, further adding to the BLD pooling on the ground beneath the grim spectacle. Death Arms rang out through the night. In an underground bar, a TV played in the corner of the room. On it was a female news anchor with 3 eyes and purple hair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We come to you today from NHA News Studio. It has been a month since the brutal attack on pro-hero Death Arms by the new villain named Bane. On the screen was shown a picture of the villain. Authorities, in conjunction with heroes, are still pursuing this villain, but as of yet no arrests have been made. The TV was muted by one of the 2 occupants of the bar. One stood behind the bar looking over a laptop. The villain's name was Kurogiri, and he seemed to be a living cloud of darkness with glowing yellow eyes as his only facial feature. Kurogiri wore a server's vest and neck armor as his ghost-like fingers clicked across the keyboard in front of him. As he worked, he heard a voice from the direction of the sole other occupant. He sighed inwardly. He'd heard this same speech again and again for a month now, to the point he could repeat the speech forward and backward from memory. I feel sorry for you heroes who talk about justice, but don't know what true justice is. The only justice in this world is that of the strong. Only the powerful are just, and you Death Arms are neither. I am the bane of your hypocritical society. You made me by poisoning me with your hypocritical venom, but it didn't kill me like all you wanted it to. No, I used that venom you all spat at me. It's coursing through my veins and makes me more powerful than any of you can imagine. There was giggling as Bane began to make an example of Death Arms. He's incredible, Kurogiri. I want to meet him, Tamura Shigaraki said, giggling more as he watched the video. Tamura had light blue hair, crimson eyes, and scars across the left side of his severely chapped lips and his right eyelid. He wore a black long-sleeve shirt and jeans with red sneakers. Kurogiri rolled his eyes as the same question he'd been asked repeatedly the past month was voiced. Haven't you found him yet, Kurogiri? Tamura shouted. Calm yourself, Tamura Shigaraki. This is a complicated task finding someone by a single video. It will take more time. Kurogiri responded as he heard Tamura's nails rake across the dry skin of his neck. He's getting bored with the video, which will lead to an eventual and destructive outburst. Kurogiri thought, resigning himself to having to order more furniture for the bar before turning back to the computer. He'd spent the last month scouring dark web chat rooms looking for anything on this Bane character, but all his fishing had come back empty. An encrypted message popped up on Kurogiri's screen. He took a moment to decrypt it and read the short message it contained. Who are you, and why are you looking for Bane? Kurogiri took a moment to type out a message, hearing Bane's speech play again in the background. I am called Kurogiri of the League of Villains, and my employer would like to meet with Bane. How do I know you're legit? The anonymous messenger replied back. Kurogiri glared at the screen. There was no insurance in this business, and criminals were rightly paranoid in this day and age, but it was a hassle to deal with. Kurogiri would rather skip past all this wasteful nonsense, but he would have to play the game for now. How would you like me to prove myself? Kurogiri responded, clenching his fist over the keyboard. Send me your location, and I'll pass it along to Bane. Kurogiri hissed. In frustration, this person was asking him to completely expose Tamura and himself. He couldn't do that not without the MSDR's permission. Unknown to Kurogiri, Tamura had snuck up behind him and been reading the exchange between the two. Taking advantage of Kurogiri's indecision, Tamura reached around the gaseous villain and typed in their address and sent it before Kurogiri could stop him. Kurogiri's head spread out into an angry cloud. Why did you do that? You've completely exposed us to whoever this is. It could be the police assembling a strike team right now. As Kurogiri ranted, another message came through. It was 4 simple words. We'll be in touch. The connection was severed with the entire chat box being erased. See, now we'll get to meet Bane, Tamura said with a wide smile. The thought of dropping Tamura into the ocean crossed Kurogiri's mind, but he held back the urge. Tamura was important to his MSTR, so he couldn't harm him even though he was far too childish for his age. For our sake, I hope you're right, Tamura, Shigaraki. Kurogiri responded, going to find a glass to clean to hopefully relieve the stress he was feeling. Fat Cat leaned back from the computer on his desk, putting his paws behind his head. League of Villains, hun, he said to his empty Weiss as he fished his work phone from the drawer of his desk. This phone contained all his underworld contacts, and topping the list was Bane. Well, it couldn't hurt, I suppose, and it's really up to him if he shows or not. No skin on you, my bones, if he doesn't. Fat Cat stated, dialing Bane's number. Izuku was doing chin-ups with 2 100 PND weights chained around his waist in his home. Fat Cat had really made good on his word after he had helped him escape. He found out about the video Fat Cat had posted about him the next day and had intended to kill the broker for exposing him to the world before he was ready. But in the week that it had taken Fat Cat to contact him, he'd come to appreciate the broker's unwarranted assistance. The people were scared of Bane, and the villains were worshipping him, but best of all, the heroes were scared too. He could see it in the eyes of every hero he passed by on the street and on their TV appearances, and that made it all worth it. So when Fat Cat called and told him that he'd set up a place for Bane, he was more than happy to let the broker live. It was a small house near Dagoba Beach that Fat Cat had gotten for a steal, since the place overlooked a dump pretty much, which also meant that there was very low risk of anyone coming out here, what with the garbage piling up every day. It had been renovated by Fat Cat's men personally. Nice furniture, and all the creature comforts one could ask for. Not that it mattered to Izuku. All he'd really need is a place to sleep, a fridge, space to work out, and a lab to mix his venom, as he was calling it now, but it was nice to have nonetheless. With the lab materials he'd moved from his old home, he'd been revamping venom, making it more powerful, and testing its new limits for the past month. As of now, Izuku could dose himself a maximum of 3 times at once. Any higher, and he would lose all coherent thought. The venom also helped him heal faster and made him resistant to injury. Nothing crazy really, but as long as venom was pumping through him, he wouldn't have to worry too much about being wounded. As he was exercising, his phone went OU. Izuku dropped to the floor with a loud thud and undid the weights, having them crash to the floor. Picking up his phone, he put it on speaker as he wiped the sheen of sweat from his body. What? Is it Fat Cat? He asked, sitting on his bed as he reached for a large water bottle on the floor. Fat Cat's voice rang out clear from the phone speaker. I was contacted by a guy named Kurogiri from a group calling themselves the League of Villains. Says his boss wants to meet you. What? Izuku asked, crawling OU the bed and started doing push-ups. Didn't ask sorry about that. Figured I'd pass on the invitation to you, he said as Izuku's phone buzzed, alerting him to a text. I just sent over the address of where they want to meet. Place is called the Mahjong Bar. I'm sure this isn't a trap or anything. I've had some of my guys scope out the area before calling you, and they'll be nearby just in case SHD goes sideways. Izuku grunted at that before hopping to his feet to see what the address is. All right, I'll think it over, Izuku said as he hung up, thinking about the situation some. For a while, Izuku had been toying with the idea of gathering people under him. After all heroes have sidekicks, why couldn't he have an organization behind himself? It sounded like this league of villains had plenty of warm bodies for him to pick through. What could have hurt? He asked himself as he got dressed in a pair of jeans t-shirt and his boots topping it OU with a hat and some shades as he walked out of the door, locking it behind him. Izuku began walking into the city, heading to the train station, when on a nearby light pole he noticed a missing person poster. He walked up to it, coming face to face with an old picture of himself. He looked at the embarrassed, awkward kid he'd once been and then turned his back on it. Ripping it down would have only brought unwanted attention to himself. I'm not that weak kid anymore. I've changed, I'm strong now. Izuku began walking faster, feeling as if the eyes of his old self were boring into his back. Only when he boarded the train was he able to ditch that irritating feeling. After getting OU the train, it had only taken a short amount of time for Izuku to reach the bar and made his way down the stairs and opened the door. Outside a hospital room stood All Might, alongside Kimui Woods. All Might wore a pair of green jeans and a black t-shirt, while Kimui Woods was dressed in his full hero attire. The two were looking in at his still healing Death Arms. As he attempted to lift a barbell from the side, they could see the weights added up to 600 pounds, making the full weight 1,200. Death Arms lay on the bench and began to lift the barbell. Alongside him were two of the strongest orderlies in the hospital. The two pros watches as Death Arms struggled under the weight until finally the two orderlies had to assist him in putting it back on its rest. It was pitiful, really. A little over 1,000 pounds should have been nothing to the punching hero. In the past, he could lift that with one hand, no problem. All Might looked to Kimui Woods as he clenched his fists. The diagnosis is not good. Recovery, girl said as she walked out a nearby room and headed over to the other two heroes. Death Arms sewered severe damage to his arms. Shattered bones are one thing, but having two jagged pieces of metal rammed through them didn't help. Even with my quirk helping him, he'll still need at least another 2 weeks of bed rest. Recovery girl paused for a moment before continuing with her explanation. He has lasting damage to his arms, so much so that I'd say his strength has been halved at least. Stones dropped in both Kimui and All Might's stomachs. Strength was Death Arm's selling point as a hero. If his strength was reduced by that much, there's no way he could continue as a hero, at least not in the same capacity he once had. You both know what that means, which is why I suggested that Death Arms retire. Recovery girl said, saying what the other two heroes couldn't or wouldn't. How could you say that? Kimui Woods shouted, startling All Might some. In that room is a hero, one of the finest heroes I've had the pleasure to know and work with. Kimui Woods and Death Arms have been long-standing friends, having shown up on the hero scene around the same time and worked multiple cases together. They were more than just work associates. They were real friends, and knowing that his friend might not be able to continue his job was too much for him. He's already in pain from having lost to a villain and had it broadcast all over the world, and then you go in there and tell him to just give up. Kimui, please, this is a hospital. All Might spoke out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Besides, she might be right, All Might said as Kimui faced him. What if Death Arms goes back out there with his strength compromised and tries to catch something that's just too heavy for him? He could injure himself or jeopardize a rescue. It's not fair, but that's the reality of it. Thinking otherwise would be irrational, spoke Eraserhead, coming out of the stairwell in his trademark scarf and hero costume. All Might let go of Kimui Woods as he faced Eraserhead. Aizawa, were you able to find out any information about Bane? All Might asked as Kimui Woods went into the hospital room to speak with Death Arms. Aizawa shook his head. I was out there all night. I busted up 3 more fight clubs in a villa hideout, but nobody had any info on Bane. He's completely new to the scene. The only thing I know for sure is that he deals exclusively with Fat Cat, and nobody is rolling on the feline. Aizawa said, scratching his head before there was a light cough from Recovery Girl. I do have some good news. One of the villains caught by Death Arm sidekicks was brought into this hospital for medical treatment. He's on the floor. Below us a man named Tyson Ashi, but he went by Black Bull in the Fight Club. He actually fought Bane and is a regular at this fight club, which is said to be hosted by Fat Cat, so maybe he can give us the answers we need. Then let's go. I have some questions for him. Kamui Woods said, coming out of the Death Arms room and heading for the elevator. The three pros weren't sure if it was a good thing to let Kamui Woods talk to the criminal, but none had the grounds to stop him either. You three go ahead. I'll do some last-minute work on Death Arms before heading back to UA. Recovery Girl spoke as she went into the room, her cane clacking against the tile. All Might and Eraserhead walked into the elevator after Kamui and wrote it down one floor, coming out and spotting two Users outside a room, marking it out as Black Bulls. Why don't you two go stretch your legs, gentlemen? We'd like a moment with the villain, All Might said to the two Users, who eagerly agreed, walking OU down the hall. Kamui Woods opened the door. Looking at Tyson as he sat on the edge of the bed, his face was still bruised, but a major step up from when he came in. The remainder of his horns had been ground down from the jagged stumps they once were. What the do you want? He growled, looking at the three pros. I'm going to say this only once. What do you know about Bane? Tell me. Kamui shouted as Tyson laughed at the heroes shouting. My hero, I ain't no snitch. Besides, shouldn't you guys be writing get well notes to the cripple upstairs? Kamui's arm shot out, forming branches to slam Tyson against the back wall of the hospital room. That man upstairs is more than you will ever be, you garbage villain. Now tell me about Bane, or else I'll kill Dash. Kamui's arm went limp as he was cut OU from his quirk and then bound by Aizawa's scarf. You just blew your chance, Woods. All Might, make yourself useful and get him out of here, Aizawa said as he tossed Kamui into All Might's strong grip. You can't do this, Aizawa. Let me go, All Might, Kamui said, struggling in the number one hero's grasp as he was carried out. Forgive me, Kamui Woods, I cannot. Sometimes we heroes have to save people from themselves. Aizawa shut the door as the two pros argued. Outside, that could have killed me. I'll sue his butt. Aizawa's scarf wrapped around Tyson before he drove his knee in his stomach. Listen here, Tyson. I stopped Kamui from ripping you in half because he has a face in the public. Me, on the other hand, I'm nobody. It's not much to me if I get reprimanded for roughing up a villain. Now tell me what you know, or I'll start breaking bones. Aizawa walked out of the hospital room, seeing Kamui Woods was gone, and only All Might remained, and he wasn't smiling. What did he say, Aizawa? Aizawa sighed and scratched the screw on his chin. Nothing much. He really didn't know anything, but what worries me is what he did say. He told me that even if he didn't know who or where Bane was, he wouldn't say anything, which is odd. After all, Bane beat him to hell and back. Why protect someone like that? All Might, too, was confused. It was human to want to hurt someone who hurt you. You think he's scared of Bane, or maybe Fat Cat? He asked Aizawa, who shook his head. Nope, this is pure loyalty. He said he owes Bane one for taking down a pro like he did. If he wasn't going to jail, he'd have gone to join Bane. This is dangerous if he can inspire this kind of loyalty from someone he's savage. Imagine what he'll do to those who have no bias against him. All Might shivered as a chill ran down his spine. It's just like how he started. All Might thought to himself. Anyway, we need to get to UA. Those irrational entrance exams will be starting soon, Aizawa said, heading to the elevator, followed by All Might. Inside the bar, Izuku saw two men, one sitting at the bar end, the other standing behind it. They turned to him, or at least he assumed they did, considering one was a human-shaped gas cloud. I assume you are Bane, spoke the black cloud. Izuku shut the door behind him as he walked further into the bar. You're just a kid, Tamura said, looking at the muscular teenager with shock alongside Kirojiri, whose lack of facial features gave him the perfect poker face to hide his own shock. If you ask me here to talk about my age, then we're done, Izuku said, turning on his heel, heading for the door. And oh wait, please stay. I'm sorry. Tamura said, hurriedly apologizing for his rudeness. On the other side of the camera, All for One smiled. Tamura was never polite to anyone but himself, so seeing him apologize to this kid was amusing to him. He's starstruck. All for One said, remembering his younger brother giving him that same look all those years ago. Kurojiri, pour him a drink, whatever he wants. Tamura commanded as Bane sat down several chairs away. Water is fine. I don't plan on being here long. Now what do you want with me? In the past month, Izuku had perfected his American accent over the last month, masking his Japanese roots with ease. Kurojiri set a glass of ice water in front of Bane as he began speaking. Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice, Bane. My associate and I are the founders of the League of Villains, and our goal is to kill All Might. There was a light crack in the bar as a spider web of fractures appeared on Bane's glass. The room grew heavy with malice, so much so Tamura began to sweat. And how do you plan to do that? Bane asked, staring down. Kurojiri putting the Mist Man on the spot. We've learned that All Might will begin teaching at UA this semester after getting certain information. From the school, we will arrange an attack with our followers and kill the symbol of peace while also blacking the eye of the most famous hero school in all of Japan. Bane was silent for a moment as he thought this over. All Might, this could be my chance to finally prove that. Hypocrite wrong, but tie my name to this League of Villains could be troublesome in the long run. Just then Izuku remembered his old friend Katsuki. He'd wanted to go to UA. Izuku smiled as he stood up, releasing the glass from his grip. I will join you, he said, looking at the screen in the back of the room. But I'm no underling, understand, mystery man, he said as the speakers crackle with sound. Very well, Bane, I thank you for assisting young Tamura. Spoke All for One. Izuku pulled a pen from his pocket and scrawled his number across the shredded poster of All Might. When you're ready, Izuku said as he left the bar and fished out his phone and dialed Fat Cat. When's my gear going to be ready? Izuku asked as he heard purring on the other end. I take it the meeting went well. I figure it would, and don't worry, your gear is in the car waiting for you. Just finished it, actually. Didn't I tell you that I'd handle everything? A little trust goes a long way, Bane. Izuku rolled his eyes as he hung up, climbing into the car waiting for him, and spotted the suitcase on the back seat and opened it. He smiled as he looked at what was before him. Perfect. Bakugo had done his best to change ever since that day at the school. He was no longer the boy exploding with pride. Instead, he'd driven everyone away from him, focusing only on his dream of being a hero. But unlike before, he wasn't aiming to be the best for himself. No, he was aiming to be the kind of hero Izuku had wanted to be. He wanted to be better than his old self, and maybe if he worked on changing the person he was and being the hero Izuku wanted to be, then maybe his friend would come back, and maybe, just maybe, he'd forgive him. He tried to do this with his new classmates at UA, completely ignoring everyone. But there was one person he couldn't ignore. Her name was Achiko Uraraka, and she reminded him so much of the friend he'd lost. It physically hurt to be around her, but he forced himself to be around her to befriend and protect her like he should have done for Izuku. His attitude towards everyone else in class was cold in diurence or rage, but with her he was calm and respectful. This manly attitude attracted the attention of Ejiro Kirishima after having seen Bakugo threaten to explode Mineta inside out if he caught him staring at Achiko again. This same event also garnered attention from the vice class representative Tenya Ida, who denounced his methods, but couldn't deny the results of Bakugo's treatment of Mineta. The girls of the class were kind of jealous, seeing how within a week Achiko had a knight to look out for her and keep Mineta away, while the other females of the class still had to deal with the perverted grape. Bakugo in his hero costume, along with the rest of Class 1A, walked into the building known as the USJ and marveled at the grand disaster scenarios around them. Izuku would have loved this SHD. Bakugo thought, a forlorn look on his face. Achiko hadn't really felt any kind of attraction to Bakugu, he was a little too over the top, but the look on his face whenever he looked at her like he was in pain, it made her want to find out why and, well, comfort him. So she allowed him to protect her, not because she needed it, but it seemed like it made him happier. She cast her eyes over to Bakugu, noticing that same painful expression on his face as 13 talked about. The power of her quirk. Then Izuku snapped to attention as he looked out onto the field, noticing a portal open. Is the simulation already starting? I thought this was rescue practi dashed. Kirishima said before being cut OU by Izuku. Stay back. These are real villains, shouted Izuku as he put his goggles on. 13, protect the students. Kaminari, try to get a signal out to the main building, Izuku said as he jumped down the stairs and began fighting with the villains down below. SHD, I can't get through something, or someone is jamming my signal. Kaminari shouted, sweat dropping down the side of his face. Get to the door, now students, I'll dash. 13 was interrupted by Kirojiri, who appeared in front of the students, blocking the doorway. Do nothing, 13, unless you want to endanger your students with that black hole of yours. As Kirojiri spoke, two students rushed at him, Kirishima and Bakugu blocking 13's ability to use her quirk. Kirojiri looked at Bakugu and remembered what he'd been told by Bane. Kirojiri, I don't care where you put me, but if you see a blonde kid with red eyes and explosions coming from his hands, send him to me. Kirojiri had been curious as to why Bane would ask such a thing. Do you mind if I ask why? Kirojiri had asked. Bane looked at him and simply said, we have history, and nothing more. So he did as Bane asked, sending both Bakugu and the red head to him, before whisking away the other students to other areas of the USJ. Bane sat on a large cinder block in what he supposed was a partially destroyed Weiss building with several dozen other villains. So you're Bane? Izuku looked up through the one-sided lenses of his mask at the villain speaking to him. He was dressed in his revamped costume. He wore improved steel knuckle gloves with steel-reinforced knee pads and steel-toe boots with Kevlar woven pants and a long-sleeve shirt with bracers on his forearms. His mask had been the most improved. It was Kevlar woven like his shirt and pants, with the design remaining unchanged and with a metal-breathing mask. The lenses were now made of bullet-proof glass, less likely to break and blind him. He told Fat Cat his quirk came from breathing, but really he needed the breather so he could use the new aerosol version of Venom. I am, Bane responded as he adjusted himself on the block. He hadn't dosed yet, not wanting to do it too early and risk wasting one of the three. Give it to me, straight, Bane. You're the real leader of this whole league of villains, aren't ya? There's no way the hand dude is the boss. He looks like some drag addict. You're the only reason a lot of us came. Man, what you did to Death Arms, that SHD was epic. The villain laughed as a portal opened in the ceiling. Showtime, Bane said as he stood up. The other villains gathering around the portal as two kids were dropped into the middle of the circle like chum into a shark pool. Izuku made his way slowly to the staircase, going down to the next floor as crashes and explosions rang out. Hopefully those idiots will take out the other kid. I want Katsuki for myself, and there's no way Katsuki would get taken out by that. Cannon fodder. All I have to do is wait and then make my move. Bakugu and Kirishima let loose on the villains, with Kirishima bashing into them like a battering ram, knocking the villains around like ragdolls as Bakugu continued to explode any within his reach until all the villains lay on the floor unconscious. We need to get back to our classmates, Bakugu, Kirishima said, releasing his hardening. Bakugu moved his hand, pinning a villain to the ground that had been camouflaged, and blew him up, leaving the villain alive but smoking and unconscious. Yeah, you're right, let's go save our classmates, Bakugu said before a hand erupted from the floor and grabbed hold of his foot, dragging him through the floor and into the second level, coming face to face with Bane. The mask was more advanced, but the pattern was recognizable as the one worn by Bane. Bakugu released an explosion point blank, causing a large cloud of smoke as he felt the grip on his foot loosen, but watched in fear as a fist rocketed free of the smoke and punched him in the gut, causing him to vomit as he flew back, slamming into a wall breathless. Kirishima had seen what happened and followed immediately after jumping through the hole to help his friend. He saw Bakugo create an explosion and then be rocketed out of the ensuing smoke and slam against a wall. He was so focused on his friend that he didn't notice the fist coming at him until the last moment, hardening his arm to block the blow, but was horrified to feel his skin break under the force of the blow, cracking and gushing BLD as he was punched into the ground, barely conscious. Bakugo hadn't had the breath to warn Kirishima and only sat there and watched his friend get hurt because he was too weak. "Don't you hurt my friend!" Bakugo shouted, exploding himself at Bane, and released a stun grenade right in front of the villain before grabbing Kirishima. "You have to get out of here and go help our class," he shouted as he threw Kirishima, exploding him like the ball at his quirk assessment test out the window of the building. "You call that boy your friend?" Bakugo turned, looking at Bane. He was singed all over his body, but other than that he was fine. "Yeah, he's my friend, you dumbass." "Villain, were you deaf?" Katsuki shouted, popping OU small explosions. "You don't have friends, Katsuki Bakugo. You only have victims and sycophants. You know, I hoped you'd be here, but at the same time, I kind of hoped you weren't, because if you weren't, then maybe I'd have more respect for this school. But knowing you're here means that I was right. All anyone cares about is power." Bakugo growled. Who the hell was this guy to talk like he knew him? "You're just some villain, so don't act like you know me." Bakugo shouted, blasting himself towards Bane and getting ready for a big right hook. He'd blow that mask apart. Right as Katsuki swung, Bane grabbed his gauntlet and, pivoting on his foot, slamming Bakugo to the ground, the floor cracking under the impact as the air was knocked from Bakugo once again, but Bane hadn't let go of Bakugo and lifted him up again to drive his fist into the side of Katsuki's face, letting go as he did, watching Katsuki sprawl to the ground. "You always start a fight with a big right hook, Katsuki," Bane said, walking towards him as Katsuki tried to get to his feet. BLD was streamed down the side of his face, splashing onto the floor. "This is pathetic. Really, you're nothing to be afraid of. I can't believe Izuku was afraid of you." Katsuki's head shot up, looking at Bane. "What do you know about Izuku Midoriya?" Katsuki shouted, stumbling to his feet. Bane was a little shocked under his mask. Katsuki hadn't called him by name since after he got his quirk, and he didn't say it with the irritation he'd had when he said Deku. It was almost like Katsuki was concerned for him. "I killed him months ago," Bane responded, and in a way it was true. Bane couldn't exist alongside Izuku Midoriya, so for all intents and purposes Bane had killed him. Katsuki's whole body went numb as he heard those words. His friend, the only true friend he'd ever had, was dead, killed by the monster in front of him. Tears streamed from the blonde's eyes as he glared at Bane. Bane smiled. "There's the Katsuki I know, full of anger and rage. It would have been a shame to come all this way to find out you changed from the monster you've always been. You want a monster? Well, here you go, you." Katsuki pulled back the handle on one of his gauntlets, showing OU a pin trigger that he pulled, releasing a massive explosive wave that blew out the side of the building. Katsuki realized he might have just killed someone, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Izuku would never be able to forgive him. His arm dropped as the floor broke under him, revealing Bane jumping up towards him from the floor below and grabbed his face as he slammed Bakugo's head in his ceiling and threw him back down to the floor. "That was close. If I hadn't punched through the floor, that would have blown me out of the building," Bane said as slammed his foot down on Katsuki's gauntlet, smashing it and driving shards into his arms. But that didn't stop the explosion user from moving his other gauntlet and repeating the release process with his teeth at point-blank range. Always on the winsive. "Fine, then let's see whose power is better," Bane shouted as punched down at Katsuki's building explosion with all his strength. Boom! USJ was rocked by two simultaneous explosions that day, signifying the end of two cataclysmic confrontations. As the impact of Katsuki and Bane's attacks resounded through USJ, another explosion was witnessed by Tamura Shigaraki as he watched his precious Nomu be rocketed through the ceiling of the USJ by none other than the man they were here to kill, All Might. I really have gotten old. Back in the day, it would have taken no more than 5 blows to take down that beast, but today it took more than 100. All Might's voice boomed across the field towards Tamura and Kurogiri. All Might didn't have much left, but maybe he could at least capture one of them. They seemed to be the leaders of this attack, but he didn't want to risk his students anymore. He should get these two to retreat and then go round up the remaining villains. MSTR lied to me. He's not weaker at all. Tamura shouted angrily as he began scratching at his neck, his nails biting deeper and deeper into his flesh until he felt BLD and flesh gather under his nails. Nomu was the precious toy his MSTR had entrusted to him, and All Might had taken it away from it with a smile, like it was no big deal. We should retreat, Tamura. If All Might is here, reinforcements won't be far behind, Kurogiri stated as he went to wrap Tamura in his portal mist. Tamura stopped scratching as an idea came to mind. Reinforcements, hun? He said as he smiled behind the palm on his face. Kurogiri, bring Bane here. I don't care where he is or what he's doing, bring him here now. Tamura shouted, looking at Kurogiri between the fingers on his face. Kurogiri wanted to leave immediately, but looking at All Might, he knew the symbol of peace wouldn't let them go that easily, and even with his warps, he wasn't faster than All Might. They needed Nomu or something. Just like him. I see your point, Tamura. I will do as you ask, he said, opening a portal to where Bane was, but instead of watching the hulking male walk through, they saw a blonde boy exit the portal. Tamura and Kurogiri's eyes widened at this. It was one of the students Kurogiri had warped to Bane. This kid beat Bane. That thought rang out in both Kurogiri and Tamura's minds, as All Might's booming laughter reached their ears. Looks like you underestimated these students, you villains. Young Bakugu here has returned Safdash. As All Might watched the portal, it was clear Bakugu wasn't moving on his own. Instead, he was being carried by the neck by Bane, who stepped out after Bakugu. Now that both were completely out of the portal, their bodies could be fully seen. Bakugu's left arm was covered in BLD as shards of his gauntlet were embedded in his flesh. His other arm was relatively fine aside from some deep lacerations. Bane's left side and arm were severely burned, with the sleeve and most of the left side of his shirt being incinerated. The only piece of his costume remaining on his left side was the metal bracer, which glowed a dull red from the heat it had absorbed. The smell of burning flesh permeated the entire area. All Might, it's so good to see you. Bane spoke through his mask as he glared at the symbol of peace. You monster, release my student at once, All Might shouted as he prepared to rush the villain and recue his student. It's true he wasn't as strong as he once was, but he still held one for all within himself and the power of his predecessors. But he was wounded. That fight with Nomu was serious. Without Todoroki's help, he would have never freed himself from the tag team of Kurogiri and Nomu, who'd managed to reopen his wound from 5 years ago. Careful, All Might, are you sure you can reach me before I snap his neck? Bane growled, holding Bakugu in front of himself. It wouldn't take much, and who knows, the sheer impact of you hitting me might do it. All Might bit his lip, admitting the villain had a point. He was fast, but was he that fast? And even if he was, could he risk his student's safety like that? Not to mention he still had the issue of young Todoroki. If he went for Bakugu, the other two villains might target Todoroki. It would be best to stall for time. Why are you here, Bane? All Might asked, swiveling from one villain to the next just in case they made a move. I'm here to break you, All Might, not just physically but mentally as well. I will break you down, and as you crumble, the rest of the world will fall with you. The first break happens right now. Bane lifted Bakugu above his head before bringing his body down towards his knee. Goodbye, Kakin, Bane whispered All Might launched himself at Bane, but just before he reached him, a portal opened. Up before him, Kirojiri may not be fast enough normally, but it was no secret where the symbol of peace was heading, so he opened a portal right in front of Bane, which deposited All Might right back at the foot of the stairs, no more than a second's delay, but it was more than enough. As the sound of breaking bones rang out through USJ, followed by Katsuki Bakugu's screams of pain. From their vantage point at the shore of the shipwreck zone, Uraraka and Mineta saw it all happen in slow motion, and the sound echoed in their heads. No! All Might rushed forward to smash this villain who would harm his students, but instead was met with Bakuga's unconscious form slamming into him. All Might instinctively caught the boy doing his best not to jostle him and his injured back, but that left him wide open for Bane to deliver a punch straight to his wounded side. When Bane had tossed Bakugu at All Might, he'd also used his 2 remaining doses of venom, his muscles bulging with inhuman strength, slamming all of it into All Might's side. All Might felt his ribs give as BLD spurted from his mouth before he was punched in the jaw, his head rocking to the side. BS got me over a barrel. I can't defend myself while holding on to Bakugu, but I can't just toss him aside either. All I can do is try to protect the boy as best I can and hold out until help arrives. All Might wrapped his arms tightly around Bakugu, cradling him against his chest as Bane continued his onslaught. Bane stepped in close, driving his fist under All Might's chin, hearing the hero's teeth click together loudly. He smiled. Under his mask, venting his rage, All Might took a step back, trying to dodge away from the villain for some breathing room, but before he could, Bane grabbed All Might by his stupid hair and brought him forward into a headbutt, his forehead slamming into All Might's. Todoroki watched as Bane hit All Might again and again, each punch well placed to do the most damage, as BLD spattered the ground around the two, and he wouldn't stand for it. He went to launch a wall of ice to protect All Might, but had to jump back as a portal opened up in front of him, nearly ing him. Inside. This is no place for children, boy. Kirojiri spoke, increasing the suction of his portal too. Try and warp the ice kid away. Bane was thrilled. He could do it. He could kill All Might here and now. Tamura stood and watched in awe as Bane beat All Might like it was nothing. He couldn't take his eyes the spectacle. Not even Nomu had done this much against All Might by himself. He smiled widely under the hand on his face as he started laughing wildly. Bane drove his fist into All Might's face, feeling his bones crunch under his knuckles. Due to how he was holding Bakugu, he couldn't get to his wound again, but this was better. He wanted to destroy that smile he'd worshipped for all those years. This was his moment. I'm not powerless anymore. Bane kicked All Might's leg out from under him, dropping him to a knee before throwing a right hook into the hero's face. BLD and spit flying into the air to paint the ground as All Might fell onto his back, and still the hero clutched Bakugu to his chest. I can barely hold my muscle form. If this keeps up, he'll kill us both. All Might thought to himself, preparing for the worst. That's where you belong. All Might kneel in the face of true power. Bane shouted before throwing his knee into the pro's face, knocking him onto his back. I'm sorry, young Bakugu. I can't protect you. Tears sprung from All Might's eyes as he stared at the unconscious boy in his arms. Bane stood above All Might and raised his boot. Goodbye, symbol of peace. Just as Bane was about to bring close to the era of All Might, bullets pelted him, burrowing into his skin, but not deeply. Bane stumbled back and looked to the doorway of USJ as multiple heroes stood there. Kirojiri was also forced to retreat as he watched Tamura's arms and legs be shot through by the pro hero. Snipe! Bane growled, looking down at All Might, ready to finish him at all costs before he was enveloped in Kirojiri's portal and deposited back into the bar, barely avoiding the suction of 13's black hole. Bane rounded on Kirojiri, grabbing his neck armor and squeezing. I had him. You had no right. Bane shouted as the metal of Kirojiri's armor began to crumple. Tamura was injured and the pro heroes had arrived, our chances of victory were no longer guaranteed. It was best to retreat. Kurogiri wheezed before Bane let him go and pulled his mask. "Oh, you." The boy was drenched in sweat, and the veins in his neck were glowing as soft green as were his eyes. Bane took a deep breath and let it out slowly, allowing the adrenaline to slow. "You're right," he said in way of an apology as a portal opened, admitting a doctor with a thick mustache, who looked down at the injured Tamura, who was bleeding out onto the floor. "You were wrong. Mr. All Might wasn't any weaker. He destroyed my Nomu. If not for Bane, he would have gotten me." Tamura whined as the doctor looked over his wounds. Not waiting for the doctor, Bane dug the bullets out himself, not that they'd penetrated any deeper than an inch or so. Bane grabbed his bag, undressing from his ruined costume, and dug out his civilian clothes, getting dressed as he listened to the mystery boss of this league. "Are you sure, Tamura? You say he defeated the Nomu, but was stopped by Bane?" the boss asked as he stared at the bar through his camera at the young man dressing in the background. "This boy fought All Might and avoided capture?" "Fought all for one. That deserves a reward, I think." All of a sudden, a black liquid poured from Bane's mouth, enveloping him completely and transporting him to a secret lab. Bane coughed as he stood up, glaring at the man who had brought him here. The man's only facial feature was his mouth, while scar tissue covered the upper part of his skull, with IVs running from various parts of his body. "Sorry for the rough departure, but I thought it would be good for us to meet face to face. I am all for one." All Might lay in one of the infirmary beds, in his true form, most of his body bandaged. Recovery girl had done her best, but he was still pretty banged up. But his own injuries were not what plagued his mind. The only thing he saw was Bakugo being broken over, the villain's knee, the sound echoing in his skull. He clenched his fist in rage and guilt. "I'm no hero. I'm nothing," he said as tears streamed down his skeletal face. "It's not your fault, All Might. You did your best. After all you did manage to save Aizawa from that Nomu creature, no one could foresee that Bane would be there. Aside from Katsuki, Bakugo, the other students are unharmed. Only Kirishima received any moderate wounds. All the criminals besides Bane, the masked man, and the warp gate were all collected by the police. I'm even told that the creature known as Nomu was recovered in the nearby forest. It may not be much, but you did do well today, All Might. Take solace in the small victories," Principal Nizu said as he opened the infirmary door, shutting it behind him before climbing into one of the nearby chairs to sit at All Might's side. "They were my students, sir. I should have been there from the beginning. Instead, I wasted all my time knocking out common criminals on my way to work, and now young Bakugo is in a hospital bed fighting for his life. I didn't want to believe that I would have to stop being the symbol of peace, but now it's apparent that I am not capable of holding that title anymore." All Might sat up and looked at the principal, his blue eyes shining in the recesses of their sockets. "It's time I go through with the reason I came here, sir." Nizu sighed and nodded. "I figured you would say that, and I know there's no changing your mind, so I won't try." He hopped you the chair and headed to the nurse's desk to use the PA system. Mirio Togata was in the middle of class, barely containing his enthusiasm for the subject in front of him before an announcement rang out across the school. "Will Mirio Togata report to the nurse's Weiss?" Mirio shot up from his desk. "Yes, I will." And with that, Mirio left his classroom as his classmates looked on curiously. That night, the same story was on every news channel. The USJ incident. On a rooftop across from an electronics store, there stood a man with a crimson scarf billowing from his neck, and an assortment of blades all over his body, watched curiously as his partner, a man with burn scars running across his visible skin in a patchwork, listened half-heartedly. After a month of inactivity, Bane has surfaced again in an even more gruesome way. He and an assortment of criminals, calling themselves the League of Villains, attacked UA in hopes of killing recent Stow Edition All Might. The man dressed in blades smiled as a picture of Bane came onto the screen. "You've fought him and know how worthy he is, you understand what is wrong with this world. The hero. Killer stood up and pointed a knife at the collection of TVs. We are the same Bane comrades in the war to right this world of false heroes and media wares. In a shabby hotel room, a naked woman was curled in the corner, nursing a broken arm, softly crying as she clutched her clothes to her chest. The only reason you're still breathing is because you were a good lay, but if you keep up with that DMN crying, I'll have to change my mind. A blond man lying on the bed in a pair of boxers watched the screen as he chugged a beer. We're told they failed in that aspect, but did severely wound a student before leaving. We're not sure of the severity of the student's injury, nor was the student's name released to us, but our thoughts and prayers go out to them and their family. We still don't know what Bane is after. Is he simply here to cause trouble, or do his motivations go deeper? The blond man sat up, showing OU the scar on the left side of his face, and his prosthetic eye as he laughed, wildly jumping to his feet. It doesn't matter what he's after. All that matters is that he's doing what he wants and nobody can stop him. That's great. He's the kind of guy I can work with. The man grabbed his clothes, getting dressed in a pair of jeans and a burgundy muscle shirt before putting on his boots. He looked over his shoulder at the woman still cowering quietly in the corner and fished out a handful of cash from his pocket and threw it towards her. Buy yourself something nice, sweetheart, he said before opening the door and leaving. In a back alley, a blonde girl with two messy buns on the side of her head, dressed in an overly large sweater covering the majority of her navy blue skirt, skipped away from the corpse of businessman as she licked the BLD from her knife as if it was a gourmet lollipop. She was listening to the news from her earbuds. Still, the fact remains a villain of this magnitude has not been seen for some time, and whatever his motive, it is clear Bane is not done. In fact, he might just be getting started. The blonde girl smiled, widely revealing large canines as he amber eyes glowed gleefully in the dark as she looked at a picture of her crush Bane covered in the BLD of death arms. Oh, Bane, what's a girl to do? She said, stowing the picture in her sweater as she skipped along into the night. At Dagoba Hospital, the doors were thrown open as a blonde woman rushed in towards the desk, slamming her hands down on it as her husband tried his best to keep up. Where's Katsuki Bakugo? What room is he in? Shouted his mother Mitsuki. Bakugo, who was dressed in a black t-shirt with jeans and heels, her husband Masaru Bakugo, stood behind his wife, hunched over and breathing hard. He was dressed in a tan t-shirt and slacks with gray running shoes. The woman at the counter looked at the frantic woman and father and looked up the information hurriedly. He's in the operating room right now. You can't see him just yet. He's still in surgery. Please have a seat. We'll let you know when he's out of surgery. Mitsuki slammed her palm on the counter. Listen here, that's my son in there. Tell me everything, she shouted, shaking OU her husband's attempts to calm her down. Hearing the commotion, UA teacher Midnight approached the couple. Excuse me, I'm a teacher at UA. I can try to fill you in on what happened, but it won't be much. I wasn't actually there, and the teachers, who are too injured to speak right now. Mitsuki looked at Midnight before walking away. With Midnight, after shooting the receptionist a glare, Masaru breathed a sigh of relief before bowing in apology as he left to hear what had happened to his son. Midnight told the couple what she'd learned about the attack, even relaying what had been done to their son by Bane. Mitsuki covered her mouth as tears spilled from her eyes, feeling her husband grab her shoulders in an attempt to console her. Mitsuki had always prided herself on being a strong woman, but right now she was a mother worried about her son. She turned into her husband's embrace, crying against his chest. Midnight looked down in shame. They were supposed to protect these students, and in only a week they'd had a break-in by the media, which turned out to have been done by the villains to get confidential information, and now one of their students might have been crippled for life. This would not go over well for any of them, let alone the school as a whole. As she stood there with the grieving couple, the clicking of Recovery Girl's cane could be heard. All three adults turned to look at the veteran healer. Recovery Girl's bun was a bit messy. A sheen of sweat coated her forehead, and even behind her visor they could tell the hero was exhausted. Recovery girl, how is Bakugan? Midnight asked for the parents who were still trying to collect themselves. Recovery girl took her visor to pinch the bridge of her nose to try and relieve some of her fatigue. He's out of surgery and his spine is intact, so there's no worry of him being paralyzed at least. Mitsuki and Masaru both smiled hearing their boy would recover from this, but Midnight knew there was more with the way Recovery Girl was clutching her cane. But there was some damage that even I couldn't fix. You must understand that several of his vertebrae were broken, exposing raw nerves, and the movement he sewered while being protected only aggravated these nerves. As you may know, the spinal cord serves as a highway for the nervous system, allowing the brain to transmit signals to the rest of the body. These signals can be anything from moving your arm, curling your toes, or even activating one's quirk. A shiver ran down both the Bakuga's spines as the implication of what Recovery Girl was saying. You don't mean? That's impossible. Katsuki's sweat is naturally explosive. How is that possible? Mitsuki asked, hoping the hero could be wrong. Replacing her visor, Recovery Girl sat down on the nearest chair to explain. It's true, Katsuki can still sweat, but it's a conscious decision for Katsuki to explode his sweat. It doesn't happen automatically, correct? Recovery Girl stated, to which the two parents nodded. The neural pathways that send that particular impulse to induce the explosions are damaged. We don't know if that's permanent or not, but at this moment Katsuki can no longer activate his quirk. For all intents and purposes, Katsuki Bakugo is quirkless. Mitsuki fell to her knees, dragging her husband down with her as tears streamed down her face. Quirkless. Is this what Inko's been feeling all this time? She thought as her husband hugged her to his chest. Bane came to his feet, wiping saliva from his mouth as he glared at the man in front of him. All for one was it? He asked, looking around at the darkened room. The only source of light was the multitude of screens in front of All for one of which was a feed from a bar he was just in. This was a bad situation. Bane was in an unfamiliar location with a man he hardly knew anything about, and furthermore his venom would run out, leaving him weakened. There's no reason to be so wary, Izuku Midoriya. I simply wish to speak to you. Bane's green eyes flashed in shock, and then anger as they bore into where All for One's eyes once were. All for One simply smiled. No need for such a look, my friend. After all, what kind of a teacher would I be if I didn't know who my precious student was consorting with? He asked, swiveling his chair to face Izuku head-on. What do you want? Bane asked, feeling like a caged animal. This man before him had done something that hadn't happened in several months. He unsettled him. Believe me when I say that I have no intention of revealing your identity to anyone. After all, it's not like I can go into a police station looking like this now, can I? He stated, with a chuckle. No, if anything, I am enamored with you. You, a quirkless boy, have cultivated a strength all your own that allows you to stand toe to toe with the best. Bane grit his teeth. He was out of time as green steam erupted from his body, causing him to shrink slightly and stumble some. But he would not fall. He would not show weakness to this man. All for One watched the spectacle silently before speaking. A time limit? Interesting, he said before raising his right hand, the fingers growing black with red lines running through it before they stretched from his hand, embedding themselves in Izuku's chest. Bane had no chance to react. His muscles were exhausted, meaning his reaction time was shot as he felt the fingers pierce his skin. It felt like electricity was running through him. He grunted under the pain before feeling the fingers leave him, causing him to fall to his knees. The first thing he noticed after the pain ebbed away was an itching in the left side of his body, especially his arm. He looked at it and watched as the burnt flesh fell away, revealing newly knitted skin as if it had never been harmed. This spectacle took place all over his left side and deeper. The crash of having so much venom in his system wasn't gone, but it was reduced. He stood up again, looking at All for One. What did you do? He asked. All for One smiled once more. I simply righted the wrong that fate gave you. You are quirkless now. More. I have given you one of my many quirks. It's called Regenerate. Any wound will be healed in moments as long as you have the energy necessary to facilitate it. This is my gift to you for keeping Tamura safe when I could not. Bane looked at himself as the healing stopped having restored him fully. He flexed his arms, feeling slight soreness, but nothing more. You have a quirk that gives quirks? He asked, staring at All for One, who shook his head. That is only half of it. My quirk, like my name, is All for One. I could take quirks from anyone and then give them to others or keep them to myself. I have in my possession over 100 years' worth of quirks. Bane's eyes widened. What he was saying was impossible. There was no way such an insane power existed and no one knew about it. All for One chuckled. I see why you were a masker. Emotions are far too easy to read. But it's true, I have lived over 100 years thanks to a combination of longevity and healing quirks, but in all my years, I have never come across someone such as you, a keen and dexterous mind far beyond your years. I want a man like you. At Tamura's side, Bane looked at him as he calmed down, deciding to just accept what he was told for now. There's that mental dexterity I spoke of. Now I'm sure you have questions, so let me begin at the beginning. When quirks were still new, rare instances among the populace, I took action after all these people had no leader. They had no support against the growing hatred and jealousy of the normal people. I became their symbol to show them that they need not be afraid as long as they stuck together behind me. Bane nodded. He could understand that logic. A tumultuous time in society, those with quirks being persecuted would no doubt follow anyone who promised safety. I had a younger brother who at the time I thought was like you, quirkless. He was sickly and weak, so I wanted to protect him. I gave him a quirk, nothing flashy, just the ability to store power, but he didn't agree with my methods and turned against him. And, unknown to both of us, my brother did have a quirk, the ability to pass on his power combined. That with the ability I gave him, and you get what his successors call one for all. Bane noticed All for One begin to frown deeper and deeper as his story continued. He passed that power on, without my noticing, and so began the line of heroes my brother created to bring me down. This power has passed down through 8 people. I killed the last person to have it, and nearly did so with its current holder, All Might, but instead we were both dealt grievous injuries and forced to retreat. Bane looked at All for One. You're telling me that All Might's enormous strength is a hand-me-down from you? He asked before smiling and then laughing. We truly are opposites, aren't we? He was just given power. That's what I hate about all the people with quirks. They were just lucky to get the powers they have, and they looked down on me because I wasn't an All Might is the perfect example of being lucky. That's all that separated me from everyone else. Bane took a breath, closing his eyes before opening them again. That's good because now I've earned my power, and I'll show them that luck can't save them. All for One couldn't truly see Bane, but even without his eyes, he could feel the fire in this man's gaze. And that's the other reason I called you here. This drag that earns you so much power, what is it? Bane looked at All for One and frowned. He may have given him a quirk for protecting his pet project, but that didn't earn him Bane's trust. But he'd give him something after all he already knew about his venom, and he didn't need him holding that over his head. It's called venom. It's a super steroid I develop. Increases my strength several times over with each dose. I didn't have a quirk, so my physical strength and mind is all I had, plus people always underestimate strength quirks, thinking they're all idiots who just know how to throw a punch. All for One nodded. I agree. Strength quirks are simple, but in the right hands are truly effective. The reason I ask is because Bane interrupted All for One as he caught sight of one of the screens showing several figures in large chemical vats. You want to use it on your Nomu, correct? He stated, knowing he was right. Venom is a delicate cocktail of multiple drags. It'll affect them, but I'm not sure how, considering they do have quirks, multiple ones each, I'm assuming. He said, looking to All for One, who nodded in confirmation. Tell me all for one, what do you want? And why use Tamura? All four. One turned back to his wall screen, zeroing in on the screen that showed the bar and Tamura getting patched up by the doctor. Tamura is my goal. I want him to be the new me. I know at the moment he's not much. Nothing more than a child who enjoys breaking things, but that's why he needs you. True evil has ambitions. Goals to accomplish anything else is just petty crime. I'm hoping by associating with you he'll understand that and grow. I know giving us the key to your strength is not something you're inclined to do, but I assure you it is mutually beneficial. Make your strength our strength. The Nomu are blank slates. You can experiment on them as much as you like, and even if the drag fails on them, they'll still be useful and you'll be able to push your venom to its utmost limit. Now tell me, Bane, what is your goal? The scarred man said, turning around once more to face Bane. I want to bring this city to its knees before me, and for the time being, siding with you guys seemed to be the right thing to do. I'll give you my venom, but only I will work with it. So if you want my venom, give me a lab and some of your Nomu. All for one smiled and nodded. I'll have it taken care of and let you know when it's done. Here's to a continued partnership, he said, raising his hand, teleporting Bane back to the bar. Tamura had been staring at the spot that Bane had left from. He was anxious until the doctor told him that the MSTR wanted to speak with Bane. Tamura felt uneasy. The MSTR rarely spoke to him face to face anymore, but Bane got to meet him after only one mission. Tamura reached for the bandages around his arm, wanting to scratch the wounds before the doctor smacked his hand. Don't scratch them, you might infect them, he said, taking note of Tamura's cracked and dirty fingernails. Tamura growled as he glared at the doctor, thinking about ripping his stupid mustache of his face, but before he could go through with it, Bane appeared in the bar once more. He looked completely healed, not a scratch on him, but he was smaller than before he left. Bane reached for his bag and headed for the door. Wait, what did Mr. say? Tamura said, getting to his feet and hissing slightly as the bullet holes in his legs throbbed. Bane wanted nothing more than to leave. He was exhausted, regeneration or not, his body needed rest, but remembering All for One's words, he turned around. He gave me a reason to stay here, and now I'm going to gather my strength, and you should do the same. To put it into words you'll understand, we cleared level 1, so we need to assemble a new party because level 2 is going to be that much harder, he said, shouldering the bag with his ruined costume in it as he left the bar. Tamura looked at the door and sat down, nodding. Yeah, level 2, he said as the doctor was warped out by Kurojiri, who took OU his ruined neck armor, seeing the imprint of Bane's hand in the metal, realizing how close he'd come to actually being injured. Bane made his way home, his mind consumed with planning, a small smile on his face. You made a mistake, All. For one, I have no intention of being your henchman. There can only be one top dog in this city, and that's going to be me. I'll play your game for now, but when the opportunity arrives, I'll knock you from your throne and take it myself, he thought as he walked into his room, having unlocked the door and dropped his bag in the nearby closet before grabbing his laptop and crawling into bed. If he was going to take down All for One, he needed an inner circle of his own people who were loyal to him and him only. Bane pulled up the most wanted list of Japan. It was like looking through dozens of resumes, and he found a couple that he found interesting. After that, he went to active crimes in the city, finding an interesting one about a series of corpses drained completely of BLD. He'd taken the time to learn about hacking. After all, being abreast of what the police knew and didn't know was always good. Looks like I'll have my work cut out for me, but for now, I need sleep. Bane shut OU his computer and laid back on the bed, immediately falling into a deep sleep. The next day at UA was a somber one. Classes were canceled as the Stow locked themselves in the conference room to talk about what had transpired, apart from All Might, who had some personal issues to deal with. This is ridiculous. The semester's not even in session for a week, and this happens. One of our students gravely injured, not to mention what happened to Eraserhead and 13. Present Mike shouted, feeling bad for what happened to his friend. Something needs to be done. Upping the security isn't going to solve everything. I think we should cancel the sports festival and focus solely on improving the students' abilities. They were lucky this time, but we can't depend on that again, Snipe said, leaning forward onto the table. That's just going to show weakness to the public. The sports festival is the cornerstone of UA. The whole world looks forward to it, and it links directly to where and how our students get their internships. We can't just take that from them. Midnight stated, causing a murmur of agreements around the room. Principal Nizu coughed, gaining the attention of the entire room. I agree with Snipe. The sports festival is not our priority at this moment, but it will be held. I suggest we do things out of order. Normally we'd do the sports festival, send the students on their internships, and then have the training camp over the summer. I'm going to rearrange that. We will hold the sports festival ahead of schedule, getting it out of the way as quickly as possible before the villains can mount another attack. If that was their goal, then the students can participate in their internships. Afterwards, we can get a jump start on the training camp. Until final exams are over, we will push our students more than before, and then once the exams have been completed, we will send them to the training camp where they're intense training will continue. This will give us even more time to groom our students and prepare them for the next attack. Can everyone agree to this? Nizu stated as the teachers nodded, glad the principal could come up with a compromise. All Might sat in Weiss on the top floor of a 5-story building. The name of the building was Nightai Hero Agency. At the desk sat his old sidekick. Nightai, a tall, lean man with green hair with blonde streaks and glasses, dressed in an impeccable green suit. All Might sat on a couch at the koei table. In front of him was a tall, blonde young man. And that's the story of One for All and All for One, All Might said, leaning back against the couch, his skeletal form barely making an impression in the cushions. I know, it's a lot to take in, young Mirio, but knowing this, will you accept my power? All Might said, staring into Mirio's eyes. Not missing a beat, Mirio stood up and gave an okay sign. But of course I will. All Might, that's what a hero does, accepts burdens too heavy for any one man. Tashinori smiled as he nodded. Not a second of hesitation. Very well, then, if it's all right with you, Nightai, I'll be taking your pupil under my wing for a bit. All Might said, standing up, his pinstriped yellow suit hanging him like a coat rack, looking at his old sidekick. Nightai waved dismissively. There's no issue. I'm just glad you've come to your senses before it was too late, All Might. Nightai stated, looking to Mirio. I've mentored him to be your ultimate successor. There's no worry in entrusting him with your power. Mirio smiled wide at the praise from a mentor. Thank you, sir. Bane woke up later than usual. It was no surprise he'd taken 3 shots of venom in a short amount of time. There were bound to be repercussions. He got out of bed, stretching as he got undressed, heading to the shower and preparing for the day in front of him. He needed to find a first person on his list of recruits, and he had a good idea where to start. After getting out of the shower, and while he dried pulled open his laptop and brought up a recent crimes report, mainly ones where the victims were beaten to death, leaving nothing more than a bloody pulp behind. If what I read is any indication, then he shouldn't be that hard to track, especially if he's close, he said, looking through the reports as he got dressed. Bane headed into the kitchen to make breakfast, nothing fancy, but he did need to take in a lot of calories to replace what Venom took. He loaded a plate down with eggs, bacon, and toast before making quick work of it with a glass of milk. Looking through his phone as he'd found an email containing an address, no doubt from All for One. He gathered some of his chemicals in a backpack as he left, putting the dishes in the sink as he did so. After finding it on the map, he made his way there. It was a nondescript building in Kamino Ward. He watched the place from a corner for about an hour, taking note of the foot traffic, and found it to be minimal. Well, at least I don't have to worry about being spotted, he thought to himself before walking up to the building and hopping the stone wall. Bane stalked up to the door, finding a key under a rock nearby, and let himself in. Looking around, he found 4 chemical vats containing Nomu and as much lab equipment as he would ever need. Well, this will definitely speed things along, but first, Bane scoured the room and as he thought found several bugs and small cameras. "Sorry, no peeking," he said, smashing the small electronics before getting to work and began his experimentation. This was how Bane spent the next few weeks experimenting on the Nomu, tweaking his venom, so that it would work on any Noma no matter the quirk set. After all, venom was a designer drag. He'd made for himself someone with no quirk, but since venom was derived from a drag that was meant to enhance quirks, it was very simple to use on the Nomu, but the difficulty came from the fact that each Nomu had multiple quirks, each one different from the last. Making venom into a one-size-fits-all drag for the Nomu was incredibly difficult, but also vastly rewarding. Taking the results and factoring it into his own venom, he could go so much farther with it than if he'd been testing this on regular people. During this time, he'd also started becoming familiar with his regeneration quirk. He found that flesh wounds healed in moments. Broken bones took minutes, depending on the severity of each. He even seemed to be immune to poisons after testing his BLD, after exposing it to arsenic and the like, but the greatest benefit was that his venom intake had been boosted. He could now easily take 3 doses of venom, with minimum drawbacks. Speaking of venom intake, the Nomu were like sponges since their minds were basically dead. They could support a constant supply of venom without going mad, which he'd taken advantage of by making tubes to inject venom directly into their brains. They'd be on a constant venom rush, able to take and deal damage in ridiculous quantities. "My perfect soldiers," he'd said, looking at them. It was a hassle keeping all for one and his doctor abreast, with just enough information, but it seemed to be working. He'd started supplying all for one with his blanket venom, but refused to let go of the 4 that were in his possession, citing he could do more with subjects that were already introduced to venom. With the amount of venom they were getting, they were willing to comply with his request. These 4 would be his and his alone to command. They would get the more specialized dosage to specifically enhance the quirks they possessed. The venom he was giving all for one was nothing compared to what he could now produce for himself. He felt better about testing his venom on these mindless things. In the beginning, he'd sold his prototype venom like a makeshift trigger, and even though it was their weakness that allowed him to use them as guinea pigs, it still left a bad taste in his mouth. Watching people go mad and die. After hours of mixing chemicals, Bane stowed his chemicals away in a small hole he'd dug out behind the vats and made sure to take his notebooks containing the information he'd learned today with him. It was nearing sundown, so it was the best time to go speak with his unknowing informant. Bane hopped a train to a neighboring city, getting OU well past dark, and made his way to the red light district of the city. He'd finally found the girl who'd had a run-in with his first recruit. She'd gone aground pretty hard, no doubt in fear of her life, knowing what the man she'd snitched on was capable of. It brought a smile to his face. That at one point the thought of this place would have broken him out in a blush, and now he could walk through ignoring the lustful eyes of the women there. He decided to use that to his advantage and approached one. She was a heteromorphic type with 6 arms, red skin, and a large horn protruding from her forehead. "Oh my, you're a big one, aren't you?" she said, smiling at him, her hands reaching all over him. He coughed. "I'm looking for someone," he stated, hoping she'd be useful. She smiled broadly at him, revealing all her teeth were pointed like sharks. "Me too, darling. So, why don't we just get down to it?" she said as she wrapped a leg around his. He sighed, holding up a picture of the girl he was looking for. "Where is she?" "I know. This is her usual area." The girl immediately stepped back, looking him over. "If you're not here for me, I can't help you," she said, walking away, and Bane smiled. He'd hoped she'd give up easily and not persist in lying to him. Waiting a few minutes, he began to tail her, and sure enough, she led him right where he needed to be. She headed up the stairs of an apartment complex and knocked on an apartment door, and the girl he was looking for opened it, pulling the red girl inside. "Now to wait," he said, sitting down on the ground in the shadow of the alleyway, tossing his backpack onto one of the roofs above him to retrieve for later. Bane began thinking he needed to get rid of all for one, but he wasn't foolish enough to believe that even with his strength, he could kill someone who'd already lived over 100 years and traded blows with All Might before he was injured so easily. No, an outright attack would just get him killed. Something subtler was required. As Bane plotted, he noticed another presence eyeing the small apartment. Taking note of the person's size, it was a good bet that this was who he was looking for, but he decided to wait just a little longer to see what happened. The red-skinned prostitute soon left, giving her friend a hug before departing soon after the mystery man made his move. Walking up to the door and grabbed hold of the doorknob, forcing the door open, and walked in. Bane made his way across the street, making sure no one had noticed the forced entry, and made his way up to and inside the apartment, knowing what kind of man he was going to be. Dealing with, Bane grabbed one of his new patches of green sticker in the shape of a V, peeling it from its backing. He slapped it onto his chest, feeling the patch dissolve against the skin as it flooded him with his newly renovated venom. The patch he made now was the equivalent of 3 doses of his former serum. His muscles bulged under his skin, increasing his height and bulk considerably. Releasing a long breath, he rounded the corner, finding a hulking blonde man holding the prostitute he'd been searching for by the neck against the wall. Mary, 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 why do you have to go and do something stupid like rat me out to the cops?" he asked as his fist began squeezing tighter, the woman wheezing as her throat was forcibly closed. "I was really going to let you live. Now I got to come back here instead of getting on with finding my new partner," he growled as he brought his hand towards him only to slam it in the back of her head against the wall, watching BLD splatter against the surface as he let go, dropping the limp form to the ground. Bane clapped from his view behind the large male. "A little drawn out, but glad you finished it. I don't want her blabbing about what we're going to discuss." Muscular, the man known as Muscular, turned around smiling. "Looks like it's a 2 for 1 tonight." Muscular shouted, rushing towards Bane at breakneck speed, rearing back as muscle fibers tore from his skin, coiling around his arm as it propelled his fist forward, only to be caught by Bane's hand. The collision rocking the apartment. Bane smiled. "I figured this would happen. Thank you for the chance to test out my new venom," he said, pulling Muscular forward into a headbutt, smashing the killer's nose as he let him go, driving a fist into his stomach. Muscular stumbled back, clutching his nose and stomach as he stared at the man before him. No one had ever overpowered him so easily. Muscular growled as muscle fibers erupted from his pants, rocketing him forward. He locked hands with Bane as he pushed him back and through a wall into another apartment, hearing the screams from the occupants as the two crashed to the floor. Muscular looked down at the man under him as he pulled back his fist to throw a punch, only to be punched in the shoulder, throwing his blow as it crashed into the floor, causing it to give way. As the two titans fell through, but Bane grabbed hold of Muscular's arm and twisted him midair to put the criminal under him and drove him into the ground, placing his boot on Muscular's neck. As he stared down at him, Muscular glared at the man on top of him and went to wrench his arm free, but no matter how much force he put behind it, Bane's grip didn't budge. Muscular had never lost in terms of brute strength. It was impossible. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted. Bane smirked, stepping him and letting his arm go. "I'm Bane, and I want you to join me." "Muscular, come with me and rampage to your heart's content," Bane said, lowering his hand to the killer. Muscular lay there for a moment, staring up at the guy before him. The look in his eyes sent a rush through his body. Muscular laughed as police sirens were heard in the distance. He took hold of Bane's hand as the breaker pulled him to his feet. "To my heart's content, I knew you were the only guy I could work with. Let's SHD up, boss," he said as Bane clasped his hand tightly in agreement. "We should leave. I'm not ready to engage the heroes yet. I have more recruits to find," he said, ducking out of the empty apartment and then using his increased strength to launch himself to the next rooftop, Muscular right on his heels before the cops rounded the corner of the street. Bane watched them for a moment as he retrieved his backpack, making sure they hadn't been spotted their escape before moving on with Muscular. He lead the killer back to the lab with the Nomu. After all, it's not like he wanted Muscular to live. With him, besides having a murderous guard dog like him, would keep All for One from sending one of his pawns to spy on him. If anyone but me comes here, kill them. He told Muscular, who smiled at the thought murdering someone. Got ya, boss, he said, going over to look at the four Nomu in their vats, each riddled with tubes, pumping a constant supply of venom into them. What's with these ugly? Muscular asked as Bane prepared to leave. They're the grunts who are going to lay the groundwork for me to take this city, he said, turning to leave when his phone began ringing. It was Kirojiri. What is it? He asked, stopping short of the door. We request your presence at the bar. Where's your location? Kirojiri spoke into his ear. Bane sighed not. Really wanted to deal with Tamura and the League right now. From a few conversations he'd exchanged with All for One's doctor about the Nomu, he'd become aware that Tamura was angry with the fact that people assumed Bane was the leader of the League of Villains. Still, he needed to play the role All for One wanted him to as Tamura's guide on the path of villainy. Bane told Kirojiri he was at the lab, and a portal opened up in front of him. As Bane walked through, he heard the tail end of a sentence. I came for him. Bane looked at the man who'd spoken, looking into the red eyes of Stain, the hero killer. He was kneeling above Tamura with a knife in his shoulder and a sword pointing at Bane. Bane took notice of the two other men in the room. One with black hair and having a patchwork of scars across his visible flesh, and the other a lizard man mimicking Stain's outfit of a scarf around his neck and a piece of cloth serving as his mask. Bane looked down at Tamura and then Kirojiri, who was bleeding from his arm and slouching against the bar. He growled under his breath. What have you idiots brought me into? Bane locked eyes with Stain as he rose from his position over Tamura, sheathing his sword and walking over to him. So you're Bane, Stain stated as he looked over the kid in front of him. It was a shock to find that someone so young had taken such great steps to righting the world as Stain himself had. And you're the hero killer, Stain, Bane said as he looked into his eyes, seeing them burn with some unknown fire. He began thinking how he could use this man to achieve his own goals. Obviously, from what he'd walked into, Stain and Tamura weren't on the best of terms, which worked in his favor. If he could get Stain on his side more than Tamura, he'd be a powerful ally to have. These two brought me here, and the only reason I and my apprentices came was to speak with you, but instead I was met with this demented fool, Stain said, pointing at Tamura, who was getting to his feet and glaring at Stain, but Bane felt some of that wrath directed at him as well. You wanted to speak with me, what about? Bane asked, deciding to ignore that dig at Tamura. If he fed into that, Tamura would lose his SHD, and he did not want to have to deal with that. Don't ignore me, Tamura shouted at the two. This is my league. I built it, and I am its leader, not Bane. You will respect me, or I'll kill the both of you, he said, flexing his fingers, preparing to attack. Bane grit his teeth. For better or worse, he still needed Tamura for the moment. He couldn't risk having the league fracture just yet. He's right. Tamura did build this league. Think of me as a free agent lending my time here, so I'm free to speak with you nonetheless, Bane said with a shrug. Let Tamura have this league for now. Tamura straightened himself, seeing that Bane knew his place in this organization, but he still wanted to kill Stain for stabbing him like he had and reopening some of his wounds. Stain looked between the two of them before speaking to Bane once more. I don't care whether you're the leader or not, it has no bearing on my question. What is your goal? What will drive you to do what you do? Just know if I don't like your answer, you and this league will die by our hands, Stain threatened as the scarred man and lizard male by the door both took active stances. My goal is simple, true power, strength surpassing any skill. The people of this world worship at a false altar of power. The number one hero is nothing more than the winner of a popularity contest, and the people view that is true power. They're all wrong. Power is terrifying. Nothing can stand in the way of it, and I will wield that power to open their eyes to how frail their strength is. Bane said, his green eyes staring into Stain's red ones. You are worthy. Your conviction has convinced me to help you in your endeavor to change the world, for just like you, I am an agent of change. This world is stagnant because there are no true heroes anymore. All these fakes that pander to the camera make me sick. They should all be purged. There is only one man who deserves the title of hero. The man you fought at USJ, All Might. Bane now understood what the fire he saw burning in Stain's eyes was. It was zealotry. This man worshipped heroes and anyone who didn't conform to his idea of heroism set down by All Might will die. Now that he understood this man, it would be that much easier to work with him. I look forward to changing the world with you, Stain, Bane said as Stain and his two students left the bar. Bane sighed, looking at Kurogiri, who was now able to stand on his own 2 feet. Don't you ever bring me into something like that again, he growled, looking at Tamura. I'm not one of you, no, Tamura. I don't mindlessly obey you. Order me around like that again, and I'll break you. Tamura glared back at him. Everyone thinks this is your league, your plan, and it makes me sick. I want you gone, Tamura shouted, bringing his hands forward and rushing at Bane. Inwardly, Bane smirked. This would be the perfect chance to put Tamura out of commission. He wouldn't be able to kill him, but making him better than 4 a while wouldn't be too bad, he thought before the speakers of the TV crackled with All for One's voice. Tamura stopped. Immediately, like a leashed dog, Tamura stopped just short of the portals that Kurogiri had made to redirect his hands. Bane is here to help you. If not for him, you would be rotting in a cell somewhere out of my reach. Even now, he has granted you another ally to your cause. You should think about your actions more carefully. Tamura dropped his hands like a sullen child. He stalked over to the bar, placing his hands upon it fully. Bane watched as the wood began to decay, rapidly turning to dust. Bane smirked at this turn of events. He was starting to drive a wedge between All for One and his precious student, and seeing as how Tamura was All for One's only real way to act the world, if that bond was broken, he'd be actively cut. Oh, you send me back, Kurogiri. I have more work to do for our MSTR, he said, barely concealing a smile. As he walked through the portal, he'd leave Tamura to stew on that, and hopefully his jealousy would cause him to act out foolishly now, doubt and inure to win back his MSDR's approval. As Bane stepped into his lab, he noticed Muscular asleep in a corner of the lab, surrounded by 6 packs and a multitude of convenience store meals. He's obviously made himself at home, Bane thought to himself as he left. Now I need to get to work finding my next recruit, he said as he walked through the streets. Noticing it was almost morning, he decided to devote the next couple of days to researching his next target after he slept. Kenji Hikishi was walking through the park, taking in the warm sunlight on her skin as she brushed some of her maroon hair out of her face. Looking at all the good people to kill, she wore white-rimmed, triangular shades and orange button-up shirt and blue jeans with running shoes. She continued walking down the path, looking this way and that, trying to find the perfect victim, and soon she did, standing there at the entrance to one of the park's running trails was a green-haired boy. His hair was in the style of a crew cut, and he was wearing a gray muscle shirt with running shorts and red running shoes. He was doing a series of stretches, and Kenji couldn't take her eyes off him. She could clearly see the corded muscle flexing beneath his flesh. Oh, a tough guy. Well, they're all tough at first, she thought as she walked over to say hello. Hi there, I haven't seen you around before, she said in greeting as the male turned her way, giving her a view of his face. Vibrant green eyes and adorable freckles adorned his rugged features. Oh yeah, he's definitely my type, she thought as the male eyed her up and down. I'm new here, bro. Heard this park had one of the toughest trails in the city, so I had to come. Friends call me Shidanki. Nice to meet ya. Care to keep me company on the trail? He asked in a thick country accent, hiking a thumb towards the path in question. Kenji nodded eagerly as she watched Shidanki take OU down the path. You couldn't have chosen a nicer day to die, Shidanki, Kenji said as she took OU after him, watching Shidanki run in front of her, his powerful legs eating up the trail like it was nothing. It was taking no small amount of effort to keep up with Shidanki, but it's not like Kenji was planning on finishing this trail with him anyway. Once they were far enough away from the trail's head and not seeing anyone else around, Kenji decided to make her move. She increased her speed, her legs propelling her right towards Shidanki. Her heart was pounding, but not just from the exertion of running, but the excitement she always felt when about to kill. She could already imagine the feeling of smashing Shidanki's body into pieces. Don't worry, though, I'll leave that pretty face of yours alone. I promise. Kenji thought to herself as she launched herself at Shidanki's back, preparing to throw a punch right at the base of his spine. Right as Kenji was about to make contact, Shidanki spun on his heel, grabbing hold of Kenji's face, smashing her glasses into her face as he slammed Kenji into the dirt of the path, a large cloud of dust erupting around the two as Shidanki placed his left foot on Kenji's right wrist and his right knee on Kenji's left forearm. I was wondering when you were go to make your move. It's nice to meet you, Magna. Kenji's eyes widened in shock between Shidanki's fingers on his face. How do you know who I am? Kenji asked, staring into those once vibrant green eyes, now dark with satisfaction like a lion who's savoring its prey. You were probably too busy imagining killing me to pay attention to my name. I said people call me Shidanki, remember? Magna's brow furrowed in confusion. What was so special about Shidanki? How would that have given her any warning about this man? But then Magna realized that Shidanki translated to breaker in English. Once more, Magna's eyes widened in shock as she realized this was Bane. It had come out recently that Death Arms had been forced to retire due to his injuries from Bane. A reporter had called it the great break of the hero's career, and then following that it was leaked that Bane had broken the back of a student. With these two events so close together, many people had come to call Bane the Breaker. Bane saw the recognition in Magna's eyes and let go of his hold on the villain. I see you put it all together. Good, that saves me an introduction. Now, then, Magna, I've come to ask you to join me. Magna sat up, tossing her broken glasses away as she stared up at Bane. You could have just said so. You didn't have to get so rough with me. I'm a tender maiden after all, she said, standing up and patting the dust from her back and butt. Bane shrugged. I had to know you were the right person. It's not like I have your number, and if I hadn't been so aggressive with you, then there was no way you'd stick around long enough for us to talk, he said, looking at her. Now will you join me or not? Bane asked once more. It had taken a lot to set up this encounter, and he'd gone so far as to expose himself so publicly just to meet Magna, a man, or well, in Magna's opinion, a woman with so many counts of murder under her belt. Why should I join you? Magna said, crossing her arms and looking away for a moment, only to find Bane right at her face. She blushed, stepping back before Bane gripped her arm, stopping her. Because you want to be the best version of yourself and live how you see fit, right? That's never going to happen in the world we live in now. There's no place for one such as you, Magna. You're a killer for one, and your personal view of reality is something no one will agree with. Come with me. I have a place for you. Or don't, and once the city is mine, you'll regret not taking my Oya. Bane said, letting go of her arm and turning his back on her. This is your best chance to realize the life you want, he said, walking away. Magna looked down at her arm that Bane had grabbed and bit her lip before speaking. I'll join you on one condition, Magna said, stepping forward as Bane looked over his shoulder at her. See, can I call you big bro? Bane arched a brow at that before shrugging. Call me whatever you want, just hurry up. I intend to finish this run and get back, so come on, he said, taking OU down the path, Magna following behind him. Muscular cracked open a beer as he stared into one of the boss tubes at his brain guys, or whatever. I don't know what the boss has planned for you, ugly, but I bet it's going to be good, he said, smiling as he chugged the beer, some of it running down the side of his mouth as he heard the door open behind him. Hey, boss, I'm getting bored. When are we going to tear SHD up? I'm getting bored sitting in this place day after day, Muscular said, turning around, looking at Bane before noticing the other guy with him. Hey, who's this guy? Muscular said, tossing the empty beer can in the corner as he walked up to Bane and Magna. Bane eyed Muscular before explaining. We're going to be moving out soon, Muscular. This is Magna. She'll be lending me her power in the coming conflicts. Muscular grit his teeth, looking at the red head next to Bane. In what world is this guy? A she? Will you some kind of fruit? Muscular shouted, pointing at Magna, who glared at him. Stepping forward. I'd watch your mouth around a lady, you muscle-bound, Magna said, clenching her fists as Muscular did the same, the two glaring at each other. Enough, Bane shouted, staring down the two of them. You both were chosen by me, remember? If you have a problem with each other, then that means you have a problem with my choices. Is that what you're telling me? Bane said, staring down the two as Magna and Muscular shook their heads. No. Good. From this day forward, we're a team, which means we need to work together, and that means knowing one another in and out, so we can work efficiently. So get ready, you two. It's training time, Bane said, smashing his fists together as he grinned at the two. Katsuki opened his eyes slowly, turning his head towards the sound that had woke him up. He couldn't see all that well, but what he could see made his heart race. There sat his childhood friend Izuku. He was sitting by his bedside peeling apples. Izuku, Katsuki questioned, not wanting to believe, but soon his vision cleared, showing him the face of Inko Midoriya. His heart fell into his stomach. Once again, this wasn't the first time this had happened. Inko was often at the hospital with him. Seeing as how she didn't work, she watched over him for his own parents. Sorry, dear, it's just me. Did I wake you? Inko asked, setting the apple down next to another freshly peeled one. Katsuki coughed, reaching up to wipe the sleep from his face along with the unshed tears. No, you didn't, Aunt Inko, Katsuki said, trying to sit up only to have pain shoot through his back. He grunted in pain, falling back to the bed. Inko immediately sprang into action. Katsuki, you mustn't move. Here, let me help you, she said, pushing a button on the side of the hospital bed, raising Katsuki into a sitting position. Would you like anything? An apple, some water, I can call a nurse for you. Katsuki grit his teeth as Inko fawned over him more so than his own mother did. But that was his fault. He was the one always trying to do everything by himself, like he didn't need anybody. But what hurt the most was how much he didn't deserve Inko's kindness. She doesn't know I made Izuku's life a living nightmare, and I'm too much of a coward to tell her. I'm pathetic, Katsuki thought to himself. For the last few weeks, Inko had been here, religiously taking care of him alongside his own parents, not knowing what kind of he was. No, this since today, I have to tell her. No, Aunt Inko, that's fine, I don't need anything. I have something to tell you, Katsuki said, taking a deep breath. Inko sensed the seriousness of Katsuki's next words, so she sat down and listened closely. I bullied Izuku ever since we were kids. Every chance I got, I made fun of him for not having a quirk and mocked him for wanting to be a hero. Anything he did, I belittled it. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. I'd be the best friend Izuku ever had. But I can't, and now I can't even make up for it. Tears ran down Katsuki's face as he glared at the ceiling. He was garbage and deserved what happened to him, I knew. Inko said, calmly, moving to grab a knife and one of the apples as she began slicing it into bite-sized pieces. Katsuki looked at Inko, shocked. She looked up from the apple for a moment, locking eyes with Katsuki before returning to her LBR. I've always known Katsuki, and to be honest, I hated you for it. I wanted nothing more than to hurt you as much as you hurt Izuku, and the only reason I didn't was because Izuku begged me not to. Inko took a deep breath. Izuku made excuse after excuse for you, saying you didn't mean it, or you were being pressured by other kids to make fun of him, and he forgave you for it, because that's what a hero does. I couldn't betray Izuku's resolve to see the good in you, so I sat by as you abused my son. I hate you for it right now, but I know that when Izuku comes home, he's going to want to be there for you. And until he can, I'll be here for him, Inko said, setting the freshly chopped apple down in front of Katsuki. You should eat something. Katsuki was floored by Inko's words. Izuku had been stronger than Katsuki had given him credit for, and that made his guts writhe in pain from the guilt. He hunched over the plate of apples, tears dripping from his face to the plate below him. I have something else to tell you, Auntie, and it concerns Bane's identity. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, followed by the entrance of All Might and Detective Tsukachi. Did we hear you right, young Bakugo? You know Bane's identity? All Might asked before shaking his head. Forgive me, Bakugo, I jumped ahead of myself. First and foremost, please accept my apology for not coming to see you before this. All Might got on his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor. I know nothing I say can make up for the mistake of allowing you to be hurt, but even so, from the bottom of heart, I owe you my humblest and sincerest apology. Bakugo swallowed, looking down at his hero on his knees, and shook his head. You have nothing to apologize for, All Might. I brought this on myself. Every last bit of it is a consequence of what I did. Whether it's karma or divine justice, I accept it as my own fault. No one else is to blame for me losing my quirk and being injured. I say I know who Bane is, but it's just a gut feeling, and Bane himself contradicted my theory, but here goes. I think that Izuku Midoriya is Bane. All Might rose to his feet as there was a clatter in the room as the chair Inko had been sitting in was thrown to the floor by the green net's rush to stand. How dare you? Inko shouted, glaring down at Bakugo's bowed head. You apologize for bullying my son, and then you accuse him of being the monster who broke your back. Inko said, tears of anger running down her face. He was your best friend. My son would never do the things he's done, no matter how much someone deserved it. You're a liar, Inko said, gathering her purse and making her way past the two males and out of the room. All Might gave a cough as he looked at Bakugo. Go ahead, young Bakugo, tell us why you think this. All Might scratched his head, feeling as if the name Izuku Midoriya was familiar in some way to him. Bakugo swallowed. Well, first, Bane knows about Izuku. He mentioned his name to me when we were fighting, and when I questioned him about it, he said he killed Izuku. Katsuki nearly choked up at having to repeat the villain's words. But Bane was so familiar with me, as if he knew everything about me. The things he said about how I start a fight with a right hook, and how he was able to counter me so easily, as if he knew what I'd do. Tsukachi rubbed his chin. For what I've seen of Bane, he seems like a seasoned combatant. It could just be his experience with fighting that got the best of you. Still, for Bane to bring up Izuku of his own volition doesn't make sense. Tsukachi thought to himself, if Bane is Izuku, why would he do this to you after all you two were friends, right? Tsukachi asked. Katsuki looked down in shame and shook his head. He was a friend to me, but I was a bully for him. I bullied him for not having a quirk. Katsuki admitted the thing that really gets me is what he said right before he injured me. He whispered goodbye. Kakin. Kakin is the name Izuku called me by. He was the only one who called me that. Katsuki said, sighing as he finished giving all the evidence he had. Tsukachi nodded at the explanation. I see bullying is wrong on any level, and it can lead to outcomes such as this. But you said the boy was quirkless. Bane traded blows with All Might. That kind of strength could only come from quirk. Do you have a picture of this Izuku Midoriya? All Might asked, not able to get past thinking that he might know this boy. Katsuki reached for his phone, flipping through some pictures. As he found one handing it to the number one hero, All Might broke out into a sweat as he looked at the kid in the picture with Takachi looking over his shoulder. It was a picture of Katsuki standing over a green-haired boy who was obviously terrified of Katsuki. This is the boy from the rooftop that day. All Might coughed, handing back the phone and trying to cover the shaking of his hand. Thank you, young Bakugo. We'll go now and give you time to rest. All Might said as he made to leave, Tsukachi following behind him, noticing something was about him. All Might, what's wrong? Tsukachi asked as they found themselves in a deserted hallway. All Might turned to face him. I know that boy Tsukachi. He asked me after I saved him if he could be a hero with no quirk, and I told him no. What if my words put him on this path as a villain? All Might asked, looking at Tsukachi, who shook his head. All Might, listen, I don't think Izuku is Bane after all we established that he had no quirk, and even you said Bane's blows were on par with yours. No quirkless child could do that. And even if Izuku is Bane, your words were meant to encourage him to pursue other paths if he took your words as a reason to pursue villainy that is not your fault. But as I've said, I don't believe Izuku Midoriya is Bane. To put your mind at ease, I'll look into the kid and bring back what I find. If he was hiding a quirk, which I highly doubt is possible, I'll find out. Tsukachi said as he placed a hand on All Might's shoulder before leaving, as All Might's phone went OU as he was making his way out of the hospital. He fished it out of his pocket and read the text message from the principal. The UA Sports Festival starts tomorrow. Bane unlocked the padlock and opened the gate to a scrapyard he'd started, coming to when he first started taking his venom. The owner had allowed him access after he'd used his new strength to crush a few cars for the guy until the owner could get his crusher fixed. It was good practice, and he'd chosen to forego payment in exchange for having all access to the scrapyard whenever he wanted. The owner was more than happy to accept, and now it would be the perfect place for him to train Magna and Muscular. The two villains were following behind him as he led them into the very center of the scrapyard, allowing the high walls of scrap metal to conceal them. If anyone came by and heard the noise they were about to make, they'd simply think it was the crusher going at it. Bane dropped the jacket he'd been wearing on a nearby rusty washing machine. He cracked his knuckles as he looked to his two compatriots. Muscular was ready to start. He could tell by the way he was constantly flexing, and Magna boasted a calm exterior with her massive magnet lying across her shoulders. From this moment forward, we're a team. That means we need to always be in sync, know each other's battle style as well as our own. Until our next assignment, we will be in here every day training until we're a well-oiled machine of battle. Understand? He shouted, watching Magna and Muscular nod in agreement. Don't worry, boss. I'm the entire battle machine you'll ever need. Muscular shouted, boasting as usual. You're a brute, and there's more to battle than physical strength. Brains are needed more than strength, Magna retorted. Bane took this moment as the two argued to take out 3 of his new venom patches. He knew each of these was worth about 3 doses of his previous venom, so taking 3 patches at once would be 9 times as powerful. He took a deep breath. Normally this would be enough to kill him, but he had to know the limits of his healing factor, and it wasn't like he was willing to cut his head OU to see if it grew back. He pressed the 3 patches in a circle around his left bicep onto the sleeve. The drag flowed into his body, transforming it immediately as his muscles grew in size to the point his skin began to tear. But his healing factor took care of it, as his normal stature of 6 feet was increased to that of 8. He panted a little, the pain of the transformation quickly being overwritten by the tingling feeling of his regeneration, reversing whatever damage was done. Brain and brawn in perfect harmony is an unbeatable pair. Now the exercise is simple, he stated to the 2 bickering villains as he walked over to a car and ripped the driver's side open before tossing it towards the entrance. You 2 need to work together to get past me and honk the horn in that car. You do that, the exercise is over, otherwise we will do it again and again until you can, or until the sun sets. Come at me full force or you won't get anywhere. There will be no breaks. If you stop coming for me, I'll come for you. If you understand, then let the exercise begin, he said, taking a combat stance and waiting for them to make the first move. Muscular smiled as muscle fibers burst from his skin, covering him from shoulders to ankles, enlarging him to be taller than Bane. You think I need this guy to get this done? You're underestimating me, boss, he shouted as he took OU, charging at Bane like a freight train. Bane sighed. He was hoping Muscular would at least attempt to work with Magna, but as always, Muscular wouldn't understand it until it was beat into him. As Muscular came within range, he threw a punch, which Bane sidestepped outside the punch, grabbing Muscular's arm and using his forward momentum spun and hurled him to the right, watching him crash into a pile of scrap. As Muscular went flying, Bane noticed Magna coming up from his blind spot, and then swing her giant magnet at Bane's head. I figure Magna would take advantage of Muscular's arrogance and impatience to try and launch a sneak attack. Not a bad thought, but she's depending a bit too much on that magnet. Bane thought as he stepped in, close to Magna, catching the magnet under his arm, stopping it from reaching its full momentum, and then threw a punch at Magna's gut. Surprisingly, Magna dropped her weapon immediately to dodge back, but neither was aware of how powerful Bane's punch was as the wind pressure created from it shot Magna backwards, causing her to tumble end over end before regaining her feet. Bane was shocked to see how much power he had from his new venom. His shock left him vulnerable as Muscular came from behind him with a punch, driving his fist into Bane's back and throwing him into the air and causing him to drop Magna's magnet. Bane coughed, tasting BLD, and feeling pain flood his back before the tingling of his regeneration repair him. That idiot, he had a chance to go for the car, and instead he came at me, Bane thought as he righted himself in midair and taking advantage of his newfound strength shot another punch, wind rushing down towards Muscular, who blocked with his muscle-cloaked arms as dust rocketed up around him. Come on, boss, give me more dash. As Muscular pulled his arms away to gloat, Bane came down on him with both feet in his chest, driving the villain to his back on the ground, cratering around the two. Bane crouched over Muscular, turning and bringing his arms up in a boxer's block to block Magna's swing as the magnet crashed into his arms. Bane felt his skin tear and bones crack as he was knocked Muscular and landed sliding across the ground, leaving two long furrows in the dirt, and then felt his arms begin to heal as he stood up looking at his two cohorts. Muscular was on his back, coughing harshly. It was only due to the mass of muscle fibers surrounding his body that Bane hadn't caved Muscular's chest in. Bane stood up as the dust began to settle. He could feel BLD running down his arms and grit his teeth as his flesh and bones were put back together. All right, boys, come on, you haven't gotten close to that car at all. Bane taunted them as he waved his hand towards himself in a come-on gesture. Magna looked at Bane and truly understood the power of the man she was working for. Bane wasn't just a muscle-bound idiot like Muscular. No, he was a tactician as well. Like he said, brain and brawn together are unbeatable. Magna thought to herself, look, I don't like to work with you, but we have to, or else he'll PND us flat. Magna said as Muscular got to his feet, spitting out a bit of BLD. I don't need you to get this done. Just stay out of my way, he said, walking forward ready to go. Again as Magna grit her teeth. We can't beat him alone. You need to work with me. Magna tried, again thinking how easy it would be to kill this man. But if he did, Bane would kill her for sure. You do whatever you want, I'm going for it, Muscular shouted as he shot forward once more at Bane. Bane sighed. Seems it was time to take the kid gloves, He though that by going easy on them they'd naturally come together, but it seems more drastic measures were needed. Bane shot forward as well, throwing a punch. As Muscular mirrored the action, their fists collided, sending out wind from their colliding fists, blowing away the dust still in the air and shattering some of the windows in the cars. Muscular reared back for another punch, but Bane didn't give him time as he dropped into a crouch, circled around behind, and grabbed Muscular by his waist. And bending over backwards, suplexed Muscular, who brought his hands above his head to keep from being driven into the ground. The earth cracked under the force of the wrestling move, but Muscular wasn't immobilized. Bane rolled out from under Muscular as both villains got to their feet. Bane rushed Muscular, going for a flying knee, smashing into Muscular, who grabbed Bane in bear hug, trying to crush him. Bane smirked as he began to pry Muscular's arms away from him. No matter how many fibers Muscular piled on, he just wasn't strong enough to keep hold of Bane. Muscular's arms snapped wide as Bane gave one final push and then grabbed Muscular's head, pulling him into a headbutt, dropping the villain to his knees, and just as Bane reared back to punch Muscular in the face, a car horn went OU. Bane turned around, seeing Magna inside the car. He'd thrown towards the front, slamming her hand on the horn. Thanks for holding him, OU. Stupid, Magna said, Bane smirked as he pulled up a groaning Muscular to his feet, BLD running. From Muscular's forehead. You two did well, but we're far from where we need to be, but we're getting there. Muscular, go back to the hideout. Magna, you're free to go. We'll meet here tomorrow where the teams will be switched. As Bane was lying out the plan for tomorrow, his phone went OU. He moved over towards his jacket, fishing out the phone. He recognized the number as Fat Cat's. He hadn't talked to the underworld broker for some time. Their last interaction was to set up Fat Cat with Bane's own drag. It was a severely diluted version of his Venom, nothing more than a super steroid, no doubt being used in the sports world, but it kept money in his pocket and Fat Cat satisfied. What is it, Fat Cat? He asked as he heard the voice of his broker answer. Bane, we have a situation. Seems there's a spy in my gang, and I need your help to flush him out. Meet me in my warehouse outside the city. I'll explain everything there. The phone call was disconnected right after. Bane rubbed his chin as he looked to see Muscular. And Magna had left. Just as well, I didn't want to tell them about this, he said as he put on his jacket and headed to the train station. The train would take him the majority of the way, and he'd be able to work at a puzzle he'd been putting OU for a while now. He'd been trying to track the vampire of Mizutofu for a while now, but the killer was a complete and utter enigma. As Bane stepped onto the train, he began to think, gathering everything he knew about the vampire in his head. There had been at least a dozen attacks. All the victims were completely drained of BLD. All that wasn't drained was soaked into their clothes. Most of the victims were male aside from one or two female victims, which would suggest a female killer. All the victims were cut, repeatedly indicating torture. The wounds suggest a small knife, switchblade, possibly. Bane ran a hand through his short green hair as he tried to put together a profile for the killer. There was no connection between the victims other than most being adults. They were all average people. What was the purpose of taking their BLD? BLD isn't worth much on the black market, and if money was the objective, knocking over a BLD bank would be better. No, there has to be something deeper, some kind of thrill in killing people and taking their BLD. Maybe it has something to do with their quirk? Bane was broken from his thoughts as the door in front of him opened, letting him OU. He began the short trek to Fat Cat's warehouse, finding it easily, and noticed the car parked out front, except there was no driver. That was strange, to his knowledge. Fat Cat never drove himself anywhere. Bane went up to the door and pulled it open, revealing Fat Cat sitting on an old metal drum. Fat Cat jumped OU, it walking hurriedly over to Bane. Glad you made it. Good news, I caught the spy. Bane crunched the metal of the door in his fist, the venom still coursing through his body as he glared down at Fat Cat. If you caught him, why am I here? Bane growled, slamming the door shut behind him. The thought had crossed his mind to kill Fat Cat, especially if his organization was compromised, but he might just kill him for wasting his time. Easy there, big guy. I didn't have him until right after I called you. See, it was my driver. He got wind I was bringing you here, and he tried to OU me. So I took him down and then threw him in there. Fat Cat hiked one of his paws at a small bathroom located in the back. So why haven't you killed him? Bane asked, staring to walk over to the bathroom. Oh, figured you'd want to get whatever info out of him. After all, you're more suited for torture than me, Fat Cat said, following closely behind him as Bane opened the door, rolling his eyes as he realized Fat Cat just wanted him here to do his dirty work. As Bane opened the door, his eyes went wide before he spun on his heel, catching the blade that Fat Cat had tried to stab him with. The blade pierced right through the flesh of his palm as he swatted the portly feline away from him. I can't believe I didn't feel that attack coming. I couldn't feel any killing intent at all. Bane looked at the knife stabbed through the back of his hand. As he then looked to the arm he swatted Fat Cat with, it was covered in some kind of goop. Who are you? He shouted as he cast an eye back at the corpse of the real Fat Cat in the closet. Fat Cat sat on the lid of the toilet, dressed in only his pants, while his chest and face were crisscrossed with cut marks. His once orange and black fur stained red. With his BLD, seems he'd gone into shock and died of BLD loss. From the looks of how much BLD had seeped into his pants and dried, he'd been here for at least a week. Seeing the corpse in the closet had been the only reason he'd turn around. It was only by happenstance that he'd turn in time to stop the knife from cutting his throat. Oh, you were good. I was sure I was going to kill you right then and there. But of course the mighty Bane wouldn't be killed so easily, said Fat Cat in the voice of a girl, as the feline face began to slip you, revealing the face of a young girl with golden eyes and large canines. She jumped away from him, landing behind a few boxes. From what Bane had seen, the girl was naked. She soon emerged from behind the boxes dressed in an oversized sweater that came to mid-thigh, and he assumed nothing else. The name is Himiko Toga, and I'm your biggest fan, Bane, though I had no idea you looked so cute under that mask, though you could stand for a bit more BLD on you. Bane gripped the knife in his palm and yanked it out as BLD splashed on the ground and dripped from his fingers before the wound began closing. Toga's eyes widened at that as her smile grew bigger. You really are perfect for me. Anything I do to you, you'll heal from it. I can cut you so much without you dying on me. You're the best. Come on, let me cut you. Let me join you. Bane arched a brow, looking back at Fat Cat's mutilated body. Things began to fall into place. You're the vampire of Muzutofu, he said, turning back to face Toga, narrowly avoiding a knife she'd thrown at him. But you're really good at dodging for a big guy. But that's fine. Once I join you, I'll have plenty of chances to cut you, so come on, let me join. Bane grit his teeth. It was true that he'd been tracking the vampire, but he had no idea she was this crazy. Then again, crazy could come in handy after all he'd redirected. Muscular's BLD, lust, maybe he could do the same here, but the fact she was fixated on cutting him was an unnecessary hassle he didn't want to deal with. Why do you want to join me? What's in it for you besides cutting me up? Bane asked her as a blush rose on Toga's face. She'd been obsessed with Bane after watching him brutalize Death Arms. Seeing Bane drenched in the hero's BLD, it was too much for her. She was in love from that moment forward. She'd done everything to try and find Bane, but nothing seemed to work until she'd heard rumors that this guy Fat Cat knew Bane, so she'd taken him and then replaced him until she could get all the info she needed out of him. It hadn't been easy. Fat Cat was either loyal to Bane or desperate to keep his meal ticket, but days of torture will change anyone's mind. You're so mean, acting like you don't know. But fine, I'll play your game. It's because I have a crush on you. Silly. You're just like me. You like to hurt people. You know people are only appealing when they're covered in BLD, like you should be. Toga shouted, dashing forward to stab Bane in the chest. And shockingly enough, Bane did nothing to stop her. The blade pierced Bane's chest, though due to the growth of muscle, the blade didn't pierce enough to be fatal. Bane grabbed Toga, hugging her to his chest. You want to cause pain in this world, to tear it to bloody shreds. I can work with that, he said, staring into Toga's golden eyes with his green ones. She was crazy as hell, but in the end he could still use her. Whatever her quirk was, it allowed her to infiltrate places, and he still wasn't sure how she'd mask such killing intent. Not to mention, she was almost a perfect copy of Fat Cat. He needed someone with her skills, or maybe it was the fact the girl was taking notice of him. Bane wasn't going to lie to himself that it felt nice to have a girl after him, even if she was nuts. Toga's face turned beet red at the proximity of Bane's face to hers. She could feel his heart beat against her chest as his BLD soaked her sweater. Bane dropped her to the ground, taking the knife out of his chest, feeling the wound close. That's the only time I'll let you bleed. Me understand. If you try again, maybe I'll make you appealing too, he said, looking at her, before throwing the knife back at her, making a cut across her cheek as the knife embedded itself in the concrete behind her. If you're going to join me, you're going to be useful. You've been impersonating Fat Cat for days now, right? You're going to continue to do so. You're going to make Fat Cat's organization mine. Bane watched Toga clutch the wound on her cheek as she got her feet. I don't want to be him anymore. I want to be with you, Toga said, skipping over to him, placing her bloody palm on Bane's chest. I promise not to cut you anymore if you let me come with you. Toga pleaded as Bane sighed, thinking of a new plan. Fine, call Fat Cat's men. Here, use his voice, make it seem like he's dying, and tell his men to come to me with his death. Once they contact me, I'll bring them into my fold under the premise that I'll find Fat Cat's killer. Right as you see the men arrive, set the place ablaze. They won't have time to investigate too. Thoroughly not, with the police and fire department on their way to contain the fire. This way we both get what we want, Bane said, staring down at Toga as she drew doodles on his shirt using their mixed and drying BLD. Are you listening to me? Toga looked up at him and nodded. Sure, I heard everything. So where are we going to meet up? Bane fished an old receipt out of his pocket, writing down the address for the scrapyard. Meet me there tomorrow, he said, walking away from her. Toga had been staring at the bloody palm print she'd left on his chest, and then cupped her wounded cheek, a smile spreading across her face. We each marked the other. We're a couple. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. Toga said, jumping in air repeatedly before skipping over to the car, pulling the keys out of her sweater. She started up and drove the car inside the building and turned it OU. Getting out of the car, she went to the trunk and found a bottle of antifreeze. She smiled as she took the bottle to the entrance and began to pour it out in a trail leading back to the car, where she dumped it right underneath it. Toga walked to the entrance of the building to place the call to Fat Cat's men. Bane got home later that day, and turning on the TV, he was able to catch the UA Sports Festival. He smiled as he watched two students go at it. I figured they'd do something like this. Hold the sports festival early so the villains don't have a chance to regroup and attack. That's fine. I had no intention of attacking the sports festival. Let them have this small win. I'll attack them again once I've got my team in shape. As Bane sat down, his phone went OU. He pulled it out, recognizing Kurogiri's number. What is it, Kurogiri? He asked. Sorry to bother you, Bane, but I felt it best to let you know that Tamura has taken your advice of gathering allies to heart. Already he's gathered several members, but he has his eye on one man in particular. But I think it's too much for him, and our MSTR agrees with me. Bane grit his teeth, having Kurogiri call all for one. Their MSTR really got under his skin, but he would only have to play this charade for a bit longer. So what does he want from me? Bane asked, sitting forward as he took notice of the next two students to fight. If I recall, Katsuki was in class 1. I wonder how many of his classmates will place at the top. Well, there's no easy way to say this. Tamura has his eyes on a death row inmate called Moonfish, meaning he wants to break into a prison. Bane smiled at this information. You know that's not a bad idea, Kurogiri. I think Tamura has it right. What better place to find villains than in a jail? I'll lend a hand, but this is going to take considerable time and planning. If Tamura agrees to this, I'll be more than happy to help. Bane said, like I thought Tamura is desperate to prove himself to all. For one, Kurogiri was sweating. He had hoped that Bane would try to talk Tamura out of this, but it seemed the man was more than willing to go along with this madness. Happy even. Kurogiri swallowed before speaking. I'll see what I can do to get him to agree, he said, hanging up. Bane looked at the screen of his TV as he tossed his phone to the side. So it seems Katsuki's class had a clean sweep. In first place, the son of Endeavor Shoto Todoroki. Second is Fumikage Tokoyami. The person in third place couldn't be there in person, but the name Tenya Ito was announced. The son of Endeavor took first place. I'm not surprised. He was the kid who actually tried to protect All Might from me. We'll have to keep an eye on these three, but for now I need time to plan. This marks the end of part 1 of What If Deku Became Dark King and Build a Villain Harem. A big thanks to Jojoflow for granting the permission to feature this amazing fanfiction. Please like the video and subscribe to Deku Universe for more interesting stories. Thank you, and see you soon.